Thank you, Chair. We're live on YouTube. Let's begin the meeting.
Welcome to this meeting of the Windsor and Ascot Development Management Committee on Thursday, the 7th of March 2024. My name is Amy Teasey and I'll be chairing this meeting. The meeting is being held in person and via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in the meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be available in the public domain. Firstly, it would be useful if all panel members and officers could introduce themselves so that the public are aware of who is in the meeting and the role they're undertaking. So, as I said, I'm Councillor Amy Teasey, I'm the chair, and we'll work this way.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Ditton, and I'm stepping in today for Councillor Mark Wilson. Thank you.
Councillor Julian Teasey, a voting member of the panel.
Councillor Devon Davis, voting member of the panel.
Councillor David Buckley, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Alison Carpenter, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Carol da Costa, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Julian Sharp, voting member of the panel.
Councillor Sana Laxton, voting member of the panel.
Helena Stevenson, principal lawyer and legal advisor to the panel.
Mikey Lloyd, Democratic Service Officer, and I'll be clerking tonight's meeting.
Nick Westlake, principal planning officer.
Alicia Ladd, principal conservation officer.
Claire Pugh, team manager in development management.
Sarah Cheshire, principal planning officer.
Gillian McInnes, interim deputy head of planning.
Thank you. I request that meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite you to do so. Once I've invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you're speaking, if appropriate. I will also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I'm able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. We will now start on the agenda items. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have one apologies note from Councillor Wilson. He's been substituted by Councillor Singh.
Thank you. And any declarations of interest?
I just want to declare that I attended a site visit yesterday, but come here with an open mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just similarly just want to declare that I carried out a site visit as well, but I was accompanied by an officer. Thank you.
Therefore, doing it, yes, I was there as well, but have an open mind.
And I will make a declaration of interest that as the lead member for Children's Services, I will be stepping out for the items on the lawns and Hilltop first school. Thank you. And that will be chaired by somebody else. David Buckley, thank you.
Just in regards to what the other gentleman said, we attended the meeting yesterday, so thank you.
I also attended the same meeting. I come with an open mind. Thanks. Thank you. And we have the minutes of the last meeting from Thursday, the 8th of February. Do we hold those as a true and accurate record? Agreed. Okay, I'll sign those. Okay, in that case, we will move on to the business for today. And first on the agenda is Ditton Manor, Ditton Park Road. So we'll go to Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The first two items are separate but associated applications for planning permission and listed building consent at Ditton Manor. The planning application seeks permission for a hotel-led development involving the change of use of and extensions to the existing manor house and associated buildings. Permission is sought for use as a hotel and wedding and conference venue with associated ancillary spa, gym and restaurant use. A new accommodation block, a back of house and gym block, a marquee, a car park and a replacement scout hut are proposed. The listed building consent seeks permission for changes to the manor house, north, east and south gate houses, the granary and the curtilage listed chapel in association with the planning permission. And just for clarity, I'm going to kind of present the items together, but then the votes will be held separately for the two applications. So this is the site location plan, showing that the site is kind of adjacent to the southeastern residential edge of Slough. There's a residential development that wraps around to the north and the east of the site. This is the M4 that runs along the southern edge of the site. This is the Botanica office development to the west, which was originally part of the sort of historic parkland. The access to the site is here from Ditton Park Road, and the current lawful use of the site is as a learning and non-residential institution. This is a slide showing the main constraints relevant to the site. So the whole site is within the Metropolitan Green Belt. There are a number of listed buildings. These are identified in purple. So the main manor house and gatehouses and wall are grade 2 listed. The garden wall and summer house, you can just about see here, are grade 2 listed. The Eastern Gatehouse and bridge over the moat are grade 2 listed, and there's a chapel just here which is curtilage listed. And the whole site designated by this blue outline is a grade 2 registered park and garden. The dark green hatching along the northern edge of the site is areas that are identified as ancient woodland. There are 2 group tree preservation orders relevant to the application. This light green hatching here, that applies to all the trees within that part of the moated area. And then this area, either side of the main access to the site, there's an avenue of lime trees which were subject to a tree preservation order. There's areas of flood zone 2 and 3, which is this blue hatching around the moated area. And there is a permissive Sustrans cycle route and footpath that runs through the site along this line here. This is an aerial image showing the site with the main access coming in from this side here, the existing scout hut here, and then the access over the moat with the main manor house here. And I think it's just worth pointing out on this slide as well, there's a number of residential properties that are within the sort of estate parkland. One that is just off this image, which is next to the access here. There's 2 houses here, and then a further 2 houses to the north here. And this is an existing marquee to the west of the manor house, which currently doesn't benefit from planning permission. I'm just going to talk through some photos of the site. So this is looking west along the main access of the site towards the moated area with the manor in the background. Then this is looking back east along the access from the bridge over the moat. This is a view of the existing scout hut from the bridge, the west elevation of the manor, the view of the east gatehouse from the manor, a view west along the south elevation of the manor, a view of the manor from the lawn to the south, and again showing slightly more of its surroundings. Looking east along the south elevation of the manor, so back towards where the main access is, with the unauthorised marquee in the foreground, and then looking west along the north elevation of the manor. So this is the proposed site plan. I'll just zoom in slightly. So alongside the change of use, the following new development is proposed. There's a new accommodation block to provide hotel and meeting rooms, this L-shaped building here. There's a new back of house and gym and spa block here. There are internal alterations to the manor and the associated listed buildings. There is a new marquee here, a new car park here, and the new scout hut up here. So the areas where development are proposed can be kind of divided broadly between the 3 locations within the moated area, outside the moated area, and the scout hut. So I'll look at each of those in more detail. So within the moated area, there's the accommodation block here, which provide 99 bedrooms and meeting rooms, and create this courtyard garden between the accommodation block and the manor. There's the back of house and gym block. Obviously, internal alterations within the main manor and the other listed buildings, so the various gatehouses. The northern gatehouse, which is here, would be converted into a spa. The eastern gatehouse, which is here, would be converted into storage and a security facility. And the southern gatehouse, which is here, would be converted to provide conference and wedding venue facilities. So the internal alterations to the manor house which require listed building consent are described in full in paragraphs 9.11 to 9.19 of the listed building consent committee report. And the manor house would be converted to provide 31 bedrooms, a restaurant and bar and meeting rooms. And this would require the insertion of a new lift, the removal of existing toilet areas on the ground floor, the removal of partitions within the western corner of the house, the subdivision of upper floor rooms to create bedrooms and ensuite bathrooms, and upgrade works for fire protection and insulation. This is the proposed accommodation block, so it will be located to the west of the main manor house on the site of the existing unauthorised marquee. And as I said, it would provide 99 bedrooms over 2 stories, and a courtyard garden will be created between the existing manor and the accommodation block. These are the proposed elevations of the accommodation block, showing just here where it links to the manor house. So that's the south elevation and then the north elevation. And then elevations looking east towards the manor house and west towards the manor house. This is the proposed roof plan for the back of house and gym block. And these plans also show the internal changes to the north gatehouse, which require listed building consent in association with its proposed use as a spa facility. And those are described in detail in paragraph 9.23 of the listed building consent report. And these are the elevations showing the proposed back of house and gym block. And then these slides are contextual elevations showing all the proposed works within the moated area. So that's on this upper image, the accommodation block on the left, the main manor house, and then just behind the garden wall, the back of house and gym block here. Moving to the works outside the moated area. So these comprise the replacement of the existing scout hut with a marquee covering an area just over 1,000 square metres, and the creation of approximately 4,900 square metres of car parking to provide 177 car parking spaces. And then the curtilage listed chapel, just down here to the southeast, is proposed for use in association with the wedding venue and also community use. And at the centre here, new landscaping is proposed to create an elliptical garden adjacent to the approach to the moat. So this is a closer view of the site plan showing the proposed marquee, and it's proposed that this could accommodate 500 wedding guests. And then elevations and floor plans of the marquee, and the marquee is proposed to be green. These are detailed site plans showing the proposed car parking area, which would include a footpath from the east, from the curtilage listed chapel in the east, linking through the car park to the bridge over the moat. Turning now to the proposed scout hut. This is the site plan showing the scout hut, and the area of ancient woodland wraps around the site to the east, south and west. And these are the elevations and floor plans of the proposed scout hut. So I'll now provide a summary of the considerations and recommendations in relation to the application for planning permission, and then we'll discuss the listed building consent separately. To summarise, the proposed development constitutes inappropriate development in the green belt, which is by definition harmful. The development would also result in a loss of spatial and visual openness, which would also cause harm to the green belt. The NPPF states that there is a presumption against inappropriate development in the green belt and that it should not be approved except in very special circumstances. The development would also result in less than substantial harm to the significance of designated heritage assets, specifically harm to the setting of the Grade 2 listed Manor House and harm to the Grade 2 registered park and garden. The less than substantial harm is not outweighed by the public benefits of the proposal. The scale and massing of the proposed new buildings would not be subservient to the Manor House and would not respond appropriately to the parkland setting and would be harmful to the character and appearance of the site. The application does not demonstrate that the proposed new scout hut would not result in harm to the ancient woodland. The NPPF states that development resulting in the loss or deterioration of ancient woodland should be refused unless there are wholly exceptional reasons and a suitable compensation strategy exists. No exceptional reasons or compensation strategy have been demonstrated. The development would result in harm to the viability and long-term health of the avenue of lime trees which line the main access, which are subject to a tree preservation order. The development, specifically the use as a wedding venue, would result in harm to the amenity of existing residential uses. The application does not demonstrate that suitable provision for pedestrian facilities would be made or that the development would not have an unacceptable impact on the surrounding road network, specifically the junction between the A4 and Ditton Park Road. And in the absence of a Section 106 legal agreement, the development would not secure financial contributions to offset the failure to achieve net zero carbon emissions. There is a presumption against the development because it would be inappropriate development within the green belt. It should not be approved except in very special circumstances. Very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the green belt and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. Section 12 of the committee report discusses in detail the weight to be afforded to the harms and benefits resulting from the proposed development and whether very special circumstances can be demonstrated. This slide summarises the harms and benefits arising from the proposal and the weight attributed to them. The NPPF mandates that greenbelt harm is afforded substantial weight. The NPPF also mandates that great weight should be given to heritage assets conservation, and legislation and case law dictate that decision makers have a statutory duty to give considerable weight to preserving the setting of listed buildings. The harm to the significance of designated heritage assets is afforded substantial weight. The design harm is afforded significant weight. The harm to ancient woodland is afforded significant weight. The harm to residential amenity is afforded significant weight. The harm to highway safety is afforded significant weight. And the lack of financial contribution to offset the failure to achieve zero carbon is afforded significant weight. Turning to the benefits, the biodiversity net gain in excess of policy requirements is afforded limited weight. The economic benefit is afforded moderate weight. The community benefit is afforded very limited weight. The sustainability commitments are afforded moderate weight. The increased public access is afforded limited weight, and the slight beneficial landscape impact is afforded limited weight. I've included the full wording of paragraph 153 of the NPPF, which reads, when considering any planning application, local planning authorities should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the green belt. Very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the green belt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. The cumulative harm resulting from the proposals weighs very heavily against the scheme. To conclude, the identified benefits do not clearly outweigh the harm to the green belt, to heritage assets and the other identified harms. Therefore, the very special circumstances necessary to justify the development do not exist. Great weight is attached to the identified policy conflicts. There are not material considerations that indicate the application should be determined other than in accordance with the development plan. It is therefore concluded that the development is unacceptable and the committee is recommended to refuse the application. There are a couple of updates following the publication of the committee report, which were summarised in an update that was published earlier today. A number of additional representations were received from neighbours objecting to the application, which add to issues that were previously raised about impacts on amenity, but do not raise any materially new issues which aren't already addressed in the committee report. A query was received regarding the reference in paragraph 8.4 of the committee report to comments from Historic England, and the purpose of the update is just to clarify that Historic England are not required to be consulted on this application and provided comments to that effect. After the publication of the committee report, a site visit report was provided by the applicant's ecologist, which confirms that the ecological surveys submitted as part of the application are still valid, and this addresses the concerns raised in paragraphs 9.128 to 9.130 of the committee report, and as a result, the 8th reason for refusal can be omitted from the recommendation. Further additional information was also submitted by the applicant, but this does not add any new material to that which has been considered and does not require further review or comment. So overall, the recommendation to refuse the planning application for the remaining 8 identified reasons remains unchanged. I'll now turn to the listed building consent application. And the main changes I'm going to discuss relate to internal changes within the Manor House. The key objections from the Council's Conservation Officer and from statutory heritage consultees relate to works within the Manor House. Specifically, there's a lack of information regarding the works required to upgrade fire protection and insulation, and therefore the impact on historic fabric can't be established. And the subdivision of rooms within the Manor House would not respect the original layout and features of the Manor House. Overall, it's concluded that there would be less than substantial harm to the significance of the listed Manor House, which would not be outweighed by public benefits. The committee has recommended to refuse listed building consent. There's also a brief update in relation to the committee report for the listed building consent. Paragraphs 9.1, 10.2 and the reason for refusal refer to section 66 of the Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act. The reference should be section 16.2 of the Act. This does not change the overall recommendation to refuse listed building consent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we obviously have the 2 applications, the full application and the listed buildings consent. We're going to have our speakers for both of those in order. So we'll do all the speakers for the full application, and then we'll hear the speakers in order for the listed building consent. So first of all, I'd like to invite Suki Ray to come forward. Thank you. So you have 3 minutes to speak from when you begin, and you'll be given a 1-minute warning. Okay. Just need to press the button on the microphone and the red light will go on.
When do I start?
Whenever you're ready.
Right. The footprint of the marquee, the bedroom block, the Scouts hut, the spa, the gym, the car park is massive. It looks to be about 6 to 8 times the footprint of the manor. This is a case of a big shaggy tail, most certainly wagging a little dog. And what's the justification for this? This is a huge intensification of the buildings and the use of the green belt and protected site. It doesn't meet national or local rules and protections. There is no justification. The owners and the operators who are here today do not want to know us. They do not want to liaise with us on whether there are any mitigations that can be put in place. They have not worked with us. There was a once-in-a-lifetime permission granted to the site in 1997, which vastly encroached on the green belt at the time. It provided 200,000 square feet of Class A office space, half of which is currently unoccupied. And I'm sure that hotel guests would love to stay there because it is stunning. It's 5-star. I sent you some videos and some evidence of the levels of disturbance permitted by the current operators. Residents have had to endure this for the past 2 years. Roads and grass verges blocked inside and outside the parkland, amplified music, trespass, fireworks, taxis in the early hours, cheering, jeering, 600 people plus at a time. You can't shut them up. Exit and access is denied to residents, and it will get worse. The marquee is to move considerably nearer. The noise will be louder, much louder, without the buffer of the manor house. It will only be about 100 metres away from the nearest property. Do the residents not deserve a reasonable measure of peace and quiet in their homes at the weekends after work? We're supported by the planning inspectorate in this. I'm going to draw your attention to the case that I submitted. That's bang on point. It supports the residents. But there, in that particular case, they were only considering 42 car parking spaces.
1 minute remaining.
177. In the basement, there was a basement venue, bricks and mortar venue. Here we've got a plastic or canvas tent in the open that can be used for up to 800 people. The planning inspector concluded there at paragraph 65, there is no doubt that the occupiers of the neighbouring dwellings would suffer unacceptable noise and disturbance of various sorts, and that in itself suffices to dismiss the appeal. The exact same reasoning applies to the current case, if not with more weight. There has been no appetite to address the residents' issues by the operators and the owners. We have been disregarded, and the disturbance, and can you blame them? Because actually there is no adequate mitigation that could be applied. You simply can't shut up that many people. An example of how it could be done, I'm going to refer you to the lovely grade 2-star listed Langley Hotel, beautifully refurbished. We're certainly
3
not
minutes, Chair.
NIMBYs. Sorry.
If you'd like to finish the sentence.
We're certainly not NIMBYs, but the residents absolutely deserve to rest in their homes without noise and to be able to use their gardens without disturbance.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. If you just could turn off the microphone. That'd be great. Thank you. So next we have for the applicant, Harry Sporton. Again, you have 3 minutes to speak on this application and you'll be given a 1 minute warning.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Harry Sporton and I am the agent for this application. I'm delighted that several of you were able to visit the site yesterday and I'm pleased to confirm the Sea Scouts are here to support the application. At the October committee, you gave your officers very clear instructions to work with us to resolve outstanding technical matters. Unfortunately, the application is again being presented to committee without us having a reasonable opportunity to respond. We received key consultation responses on the same day we were told the application was going to this committee. That said, we have now formally responded and consider there to be no unresolved issues. So what have we done since the last planning committee? We've reduced the proposed bedroom block to retain additional trees, made several internal amendments in response to heritage comments, reduced the car parking area to protect trees and improve the relationship with the chapel, addressed all your highway team's comments, changed the colour of the marquee to minimise visual impact, and proposed a parkland restoration management plan to enhance the ancient woodland and veteran trees. Turning to the reasons for refusal, 1, 2 and 3 relate to Greenbelt heritage and design. A very special circumstances case and net heritage benefit has been demonstrated. This includes significant economic benefits, over 200% biodiversity net gain, and securing the long-term future of this historic site. Disappointingly, several of the scheme benefits are given very limited weight by the officers, including our strategy to celebrate this site as the birthplace of radar. Residential amenity. We've agreed a 1 AM curfew and a maximum noise limit with your EPO. Additionally, we are fully committed to agreeing a robust noise management plan by condition to control dispersal and taxi movements. I would also add the new hotel accommodation will reduce nighttime trips, as many guests would use the hotel facilities and leave the site the next day.
1 minute remaining.
Our leading specialist advice confirms there is no harm to ancient woodland. Trees. The objection relates to a new path that your highway department requested. We have submitted evidence of a suitable no-dig solution to ensure no harm to the existing tree roots. If necessary, this path can be removed from the proposal. In addition, a minimum of 187 new trees would replace the 39 low-quality trees that are lost. Slough has raised 2 new issues, received only last week, with respect to traffic impact and pedestrian connectivity. In response to impact, the peak time trips would actually be lower than the existing situation, and there are already numerous pedestrian routes into and through the site. Your highways department raises no objection. In summary, we've made a series of improvements to the scheme and consider there to be a strong VSC case and net heritage benefit. We would like to work with residents through a management plan to ensure no amenity issues. All remaining matters can be controlled by condition.
3 minutes,
Allow
Chair.
the proposal to come forward and all the significant financial investment for the borough with a wealth of benefits to the local community. I would also
Thank
add,
you.
can I just add one final point? Chair?
No, I'd let you finish your sentence.
Just
The
about
same
the
as
hours
the
of operation might be beneficial to the residents.
No, I'm giving the same to everybody, and I did let you finish your sentence. You'd already gone over time. Thank you. Right, next we have councillors. Councillor Reynolds. And the same for you. You have 3 minutes and 1 minute warning.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Reynolds. I'm the Chair of the Maidenhead Development Management Committee, and I'm also the Cabinet Member for Community and Leisure, and that's the capacity I speak to you tonight. The Council and the administration are passionate about tourism and supporting local businesses. Lots of local businesses haven't fully recovered from COVID, and tourism, especially in the events and conferencing sector, are struggling. We're developing a new 5-year tourism and visitor economy plan, boosting tourism in Windsor Maidenhead and capitalising for residents of the borough. A big part of this emerging plan is MICE, otherwise known as meetings and events. This is a key source of revenue for the council, great driver for business, supporting local businesses with jobs and growth. The scheme brought before you last year was recommended for refusal. The panel made many comments on the plan and asked officers to work constructively with the developers to improve the scheme and bring it back. So from my perspective, it's disappointing that even though, as the panel members have asked, improvements have been made, it's come back for refusal with more reasons for refusal than before, some of which seem to be totally new, despite no material change in that area. Feedback the panel members made that I've seen change across the site is a retention of trees, reduction on the car parking spaces to help preserve the green belt openness. The colour of the marquee, which was complained about last time, has been changed to green to help it fit in, changes to the scout hut, and many other comments picked up by officers and by panel members have been adjusted. For me, there are many benefits of this scheme. Improved public access for walking and cycling, the new health and fitness facility accessible for local residents in Windsor and Maidenhead, helping to have Datchet, Horton and Wraysbury have that proper fitness and health facility which they so desperately need. Restoration of the chapel, the new scout hut for the Sea Scouts, and having seen their current home, it's in much need of renovation. The massive economic benefit across the community, over 100 jobs once this is built out. The visitor economy impact that it will have, it will really boost the meetings and events industry locally.
1 minute remaining.
All of these I see, and I have seen in my other role as Chair of Maidenhead Planning, be used as very special circumstances. Let's not forget long-term investment in maintaining and improving this site to preserve it for the future. This would be lost by refusing tonight's application. Who knows what could happen to the heritage of the site should we refuse this application and the owners simply say enough's enough and walk away. We can't risk this not being built and not having this preserved for the future. Therefore, we can't risk rejecting the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. And finally, Councillor Larkham. Again, you have 3 minutes and you'll have a 1 minute warning.
Good evening, councillors. Larkham, Datchet, Horton and Wraysbury. I was first elected to Datchet Parish Council in 1986. And I lived in Wraysbury for 20 years before that. I think I know the place. I think I know the people. I think I know what's good for them and what's bad for them. I am supporting this application because I think it's common sense to go forward with it, in all honesty. And it's a realistic solution in the circumstances. Anybody who owns a building like that, it's a money pit. It eats money. So it has to be, it has to generate an income. That's the reality. Everything has been said except how many more employees are coming there? Is it 120, 180, something like that on the site? That sort of order of magnitude. It can only be good for Datchet on balance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so now we'll take the public speakers for the listed building consent. So we have no public speakers on that, but we do have the applicant again, so Harry Sporton. Thank you. And again, you have 3 minutes with a 1 minute warning.
The proposed development would restore lost areas of woodland, conserve and restore ancient woodland, repair and restore the chapel, which is currently in a poor state of repair and has recently been vandalised, reinstate a purposeful approach to the gatehouse and eastern elevation of the manor house, removing existing unsightly security fencing, relocate the scout hut and replace it with an area with high quality and international landscaping, which is reflective of the historic character of the park, create a new courtyard to the west of the manor house, from which the architectural interest of the house and parkland can be better appreciated, and which provides a marked improvement to the current conditions. Include walks and trails with information on the significant history of the park, including the internationally significant development of radar technology there, better reveal the significance of the park and the manor house. All of these measured would clearly enhance the significance of the park and garden, and would better reveal the significance to the public. Not only are these public benefits, they are also heritage effects that must be considered alongside other effects identified. By ignoring these, the conservation consultation response fails to adequately consider the full effects of the proposed development on the significance of the park and garden. When all effects are considered, including the clear, substantial benefits outlined above, in our view, it is evident the proposed development would provide a clear and substantive net benefit to the heritage values of Ditton Park. Thank you.
Thank you. And then again, we have Councillor Reynolds for another 3 minutes with a 1 minute warning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I won't speak for long on this, but from reading the officer's report, to me, this hinges on the Manor House and the work that's being proposed for it. I'll be interested personally to see how the Manor House has changed over time, comparing from when the Manor House was first built. The changes to where we are today must be significant. And to me, the proposals for the future are just the next step in the life of the Manor House and the building and what it does and how it performs. The original Manor House was designed, obviously, as a house. And this is no longer possible. Therefore, we should be expecting some changes to be made to bring it up to what people would expect in 2024. And as the applicant has chosen a hotel, we should expect some changes to bring it to a hotel for 2024. For me, this is really simple. We could keep things the same, not make any changes to this building or any of our listed buildings, and many would fall into disrepair. That's the facts. There isn't too much demand for a manor house in 2024. This is a way for the council to preserve the building, preserve the heritage asset, and yes, make adjustments to the internal form, but to keep it well maintained, keep it in use, in occupation, and keep it for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, that's the end of the public speakers. So I will open it up to debate for members. Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to the public speakers and looking at what our legal obligations are when we take an application into account, I find myself really, really torn. We know that when we look at the building on Greenbelt or development on Greenbelt has to have very special circumstances to outweigh any harm. I've just been looking at the stats for employment in this area. We have very, very low unemployment levels in this area. And one of the stats that are quite striking is that we have a negative, 4% negative employment in hospitality. That means that we have 4% more hospitality jobs in this area than we can fulfill with employees. So for me, when I look at the employment element of this as being a very special circumstance, I kind of have to weigh that up with the fact that we already have 4% hospitality jobs that are not being fulfilled in this area? And can we say that those will be fulfilled locally? I'm not quite sure about that. Did you want to interrupt?
Yeah, so by area, do you mean Windsor or do you mean Berkshire?
I mean Windsor and Maidenhead. Do you want to just...
Just thinking most of our jobs will probably be filled by Slough.
Councillor, do you just want to let Carol discuss it, and then we can come to comments in a minute? Thank you.
Yeah, so regardless, we still have a negative number of hospitality jobs. So when I look at the job being an element for special circumstance, I kind of have to weigh that against what jobs are not being fulfilled currently in this area. When I look at the building and the heritage of that building, and it's a wonderful building, and yes, nobody's going to buy a house like that to live in these days. We're not going to go back to its original purpose because we don't have lords of the manor anymore. Well, we do, but they don't live in those kind of houses. We've got quite a few royal family living locally. So I am swaying. I just really find it hard to put the legal aspect that we have to look at into what, and that's what my head's saying, to what my heart is saying, that I would like to see this building used. But we have a legal obligation to look at what planning law says. And planning law says that actually the significant special circumstance really isn't enough to outweigh what our planning law says at this moment in time. And I really wish I could find a way of bringing my heart and my head together on this one. And I guess I'll just have to finish listening to what other people have to say on it and see what happens when we come to the vote. Thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Right, where shall I start with this one? It's quite a big application. It's quite complex. I'll tell you where I am at. It reminds me of an application a few years ago in the borough. Similar operation. Hotelier wanted to refurbish and extend and modernise and all sorts. Want to spend a few million quid. There was a lot of objection about that one. That was in Maidenhead. We approved it at the committee. That is now one of the top wedding destinations in this country. It's in Monkey Island in Maidenhead. Absolutely fantastic. Then it reminds me about another site in Birch's Green. Beautiful building in the green belt. The Berkshire College of Agriculture that runs it, they couldn't afford to keep the repairs on their historic building. So what they've done is they sold a parcel of land, residential development. Developers come along and put a load of houses up. Came to committee and we had to approve it because of the very special circumstances. It wasn't in the borough local plan. The reason it was approved was because the college was going to use the money to upgrade their existing asset. Now, what we've got in front of us is a site that the applicant is willing to invest millions of pounds in the borough, in an area of the borough which is quite deprived, very close to Slough. And you go over the road to Slough, you know, it's tough out there. It's tough. We can never have enough jobs in the area. So that's where my mind is. The community, I like the community benefits, and I've seen the weight afforded to these benefits. The Scout Hut, I mean, the applicant's willing to invest a huge sum of money into a Scout Hut, and we've got the Scouts here today, and the fact that they're not only willing to invest the money, but they're also willing to support them with a grant in perpetuity. I mean, that is fantastic. The chapel, I mean, I visited yesterday, and absolutely fantastic building from the outside. But you go closer, the windows are smashed, there's vandalism, the inside is in total disrepair. Now, the only person that's going to invest money is the owner of the site. And the only way they will do that is if they've got money to invest. If it makes economic sense, the maths has to work. So I know there's still work to be done on this application, but I've got to disagree with officers on this. Some of the weighting, I think is profoundly wrong, and I'll go into detail into that later on. But at the moment, listening to the applicants, listening to the lead member, listening to the ward councillor, who's been a councillor there since 1986, and listening to the resident as well, I'm confident we can defer this application and delegate it back to officers, add conditions onto the application to address these issues, and get this scheme underway. So at the moment, I'm minded to propose this to defer and delegate, but I'm willing to listen to see if I'll be swayed by the debate. Thank you.
I've just asked Gillian to come back in.
I mean, after everybody's made comments, I'm sure the case officer will come back in, but I need to identify that any funding that is proposed for the Scouts cannot be a material consideration by you in terms of this application. I'm sure most of you are very clearly aware that you cannot buy a planning permission. You need to be very clear that is not a material planning consideration. You should not take it into account in any of your considerations.
Just come back.
Sorry, if I can come back on that. Gideon, is the point that I was making on that particular point on the Scout site is that the applicant is investing a significant amount of money into providing a new facility, a new building for the Scouts. That is a community asset. It's clear in the national policy framework somewhere. Let me have a look. I did have a look at it earlier. Paragraph 97, to provide the social, recreational and cultural facilities and services a community needs, planning and policies and decisions should plan positively for the provision and use of these shared spaces, community facilities. And it goes on and it talks about places of worship, open space, sports venues, meeting places. So I will give the Scouts a consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. I think this is going to focus on very special circumstances. And I think from the local aspect, I agree with Councillor Singh, it's a very deprived, one of the most deprived areas in the borough. It has a catchment area much larger because it goes into Slough. There is, in my opinion, significant, very special circumstances in regards to this application, both economic, community benefits. I do add considerable weight of maintaining a listed building because we visited the property yesterday. It's a listed building. It says what it does on the tin, really. Basically, it's really important that we maintain these structures, and there's very little money around from investors or private that will maintain these properties. And we have, as a borough, let this property go into disrepair. I'm not going to go into the reasons why, but we saw it yesterday. So officers will engage with us and tell us that they will maintain these properties and they will enforce them and make sure they are maintained. we actually saw a property that's gone into disrepair and is continuing to go into disrepair. It needs to be taken by some care and attention by somebody, and the investor, to bring this property back up to the standard that it could be. And we found out about the historic benefits of where radar was invented. None of us knew this, and we found these things. And I've seen the applicant's report that there's a point of a historic and heritage programme looking to be developed. And I think their commitment, as Councillor Singer said, regarding different parts of the community, Scouts and other community groups, that they're willing to say, do what they say. I think there's also sustainability commitments. I think there's a biodiversity net gains been met. I have concerns from the statutory consultees in regards to highways and regarding the residents, regarding noise and times of use of certain areas, which I think could be limited by conditions on the application. I think, as the applicant, if it's true, the officers can come back on this. The applicant says that they've mitigated all the objections. I feel comfortable that under conditions we could certainly deal with the highways statutory consultee issues. But I think there are, we've got the situation here. We've got 8.5 million visitors coming to Windsor every year, with the second largest tourist facility in the UK outside of London. We only have 500,000 people staying overnight. And the reason for that is the lack of accommodation. We have a number of our hotels being taken up by different reasons, home office, and I won't go into the ins and outs. And we're losing accommodation across the borough. So we need to encourage people who are willing to invest in it and bring that facility and allow us access to bring and get people to stay overnight and improve our local economy. So I would disagree with officers, and I think there are very, very special circumstances on this particular application, of which I've listed some there. But again, I continue to listen to other panel members and officers tonight before I draw a conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Teasey.
Thank you, Chair. I feel a very similar way to the way that Councillor Buckley and also Councillor Acosta said. I think it's my sort of initial thing when we were listening to the officer report and seeing all the weightings that they had given the various things, was that there was almost a head and heart thing. I completely see that we have an obligation here as councillors, as committee members. We have to follow the law. We have to follow the law. We have to do things. We cannot just say, oh, well, I want this, and therefore it's that. We can't do that. But let's try and unpick this. To me, let me just leave one thing aside, the biggest one of the lot, the green belt. I'll come back to that in a second, because that is by miles, I think, the one that definitely sort of, by statutory, as the officers rightly said, that there's a statutory presumption of sort of substantial harm. Sort of pretty much any development you build a shed, that's substantial harm. And so let's just leave that aside. I think the others, that this is the thing, it is as disconnect, there's an incongruous development, there's heritage harm. Well, actually looking at this, looking at how it is now, looking at how it's planned to be, I would have thought almost the opposite is true. That actually this could this actually could be a real benefit in terms of, from a heritage, preserving the heritage of the place and the history. Now, I will almost declare an interest in that I have not, almost to not have had an interest in that I wasn't there at that meeting. I couldn't attend the meeting. I have seen the site, and I would concur, actually, from what I have seen, that it is a rundown area. It's listening to the lady who spoke against this, and she sent us some really videos of just how it is, and the carnage there is, cars parked outside. Now, to me, that is one that I would be concerned about, and maybe something could be conditioned, but I am at least there. It does seem that there's a potential for actually improving that situation with this. There is a potential for improving that, given the parking on site, given the fact that we will get, at the moment the officers said themselves that the marquee there doesn't have planning permission. It seems that it's a bit of a Wild West out there at the moment. Some of the, but let me just come back to the one thing, the one point, because I've spoken long enough on this one, which it does seem to come back to, and it is the green belt. And yes, I concur that are there very special circumstances? And if there are not, then we have to refuse this. If there are, then we may approve this. Now, to me, I won't repeat what I've heard, but I would add another one, and I mentioned it the last time this came to panel a few months ago, and this is an example of where very special circumstances were identified, and the panel was minded to pass, and it happened here. It was well, I'm not sure in this room, but it was to do with the Legoland Hotel. Now, I think that there are some specific things that are very similar. Number one, if you like, you have a discrete site. It is a discrete site. It is not just, here's a bit of land and we're going to put something. It's a discrete, this is the Ditton Park, Ditton Park versus Legoland. Number two, you have a development or proposed development that enhances the existing asset that is there. And I think that that's, people now certainly, we've seen that, we've all had to, we've all been to the Legoland Hotel. It's absolutely lovely. And I would just reiterate on the economy on visiting. Yes, as Councillor Buckley said, there are 8.5 million visitors only, but we need hotel spaces, and I think we especially need the sort of high-end hotel places that I suspect would raise that area up in a way that it is needed. And I worry, because if you like, this is a second bite of the cherry. I worry that if we reject today, what will happen? Okay, status quo, but the status quo is not very good at the moment. The status quo is a bit of a Wild West out there, a rundown area, and a heritage asset that might fall into disrepair.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Davies.
My main concern is with traffic and noise affecting residents who live nearby. It is a large development. It's going to have increased traffic and noise. The marquee where outdoor-ish weddings take place provided a lot of noise before. We have video proof of this. It's going to be moved closer to the housing, and it no longer has the house blocking the noise. I'm not sure we could condition for a noise impact assessment before that marquee is built. That's I think for our guidance on that. But without it, I wouldn't want to approve this. I don't think the overall improvement, both to heritage, arguably, and economy, is worth sacrificing local residents.
Thank you. I'm going to take people who haven't spoken, and then I'll come back to you. So, Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. I think this is a very, very interesting development, but unfortunately, it's in Greenbelt, and you heard the officers outline very clearly that there is a presumption against development in the green belt. So whilst I love the idea of a flourishing hotel with a sideline in weddings and all that sort of thing, it sounds like a great little business, but actually it's in the wrong place because it's in Greenbelt. And as soon as you start saying it's all right to do this, what we are doing here is actually driving a coach and horses through the Greenbelt policy throughout the borough. This is not just about this specific site. It's about how we can manage the Greenbelt throughout the borough. And whilst it's really lovely to think that, there will be a new scout hut and all those things, it's all highly commendable. But having sat on planning for many years now and sat through many hours of people coming up with policy, with proposals for development in the green belt, and there are many of them that have taken many years to get through. And here we've heard from the officers that actually the special circumstances that are being talked about from a planning policy point of view do not meet the requirements to outweigh the harm to the green belt that is being done by this application. So whilst I'd love to think that we can have this development, actually, when you look at it from a planning policy point of view, and that's what we really should be thinking about, not whether or not we like the idea of these things, but from a planning policy point of view, we need to really consider carefully what we're doing. And if we approve this tonight, we are driving a coach and horses through our greenbelt policy, and you will very quickly see applications coming through in all sorts of areas that you haven't thought about, which we will find very difficult to defend because this application has gone through. So we need to ensure very carefully that we are following the correct legislation as set out by the government on our planning policy, and that we're doing the right thing for the residents in the area who are very concerned about protection of the green belt. Now, we all know that we want developments in many different areas, but we need to be sure that we're doing the right developments in the right area. I would love to see this development in an area that wasn't green belt, and I'd love to see it come forward and make a splendid success of this sort of scheme. I can see many benefits. I can see that potentially employment and open access and all sorts of things which would flow from this. But I'm afraid that from a planning policy point of view, it fails the test. And it fails it. We've been told by the officers very clearly that it fails that test very substantially. So you would unfortunately have to come up with some incredible tautology to be able to pass this through the system. So whilst I totally think a scheme like this would be a real major benefit, in this place it's not, and we should, and I want to propose that we move officers' proposals and refuse this. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Councillor Carpenter, and then, would you like to speak now? And then we'll go to officers for some comments, and then we can come back if there's any more after that. Okay.
Thank you. I hear what everyone else has said. I would like to question some of the reasons for the rejections. So first of all, obviously the biggest one is the green belt. From what I can see, some of the development will be on replacing existing development that's already there. So for example, some of the extension will replace the existing, I would say quite ugly marquee that's there already, and that hasn't got planning permission anyway. So the fact that that has already been built on Greenbelt without any permission surely sets a precedent, and also that the development that's going to replace that seems to be more in keeping with the current development that's there, so actually an improvement. Also the proposed gym seems to be, replacing a car park that's there already, and really the only exception to this would be probably the Scout Hut, I suppose, which is going to be quite close to the ancient woodland. But also precedent seems to have been set with that because there's already a concrete path going through that ancient woodland. So, you know, I'd maybe question some of that. You know, it's not like we're knocking down, you know, hundreds of trees to do that. In terms of trees, I know that some will be lost. It looks like more than 4 times that are going to be planted in its place, but some of that seems to relate to a pathway that actually we asked for. So maybe that needs to be reviewed to save some of those trees. In terms of the noise, I know that noise is a concern to the residents, and we watched a video that was sent, thank you, today from one of the residents. But I actually think that this could be an improvement to the current situation, because a lot of the people that are coming now seem to be parking close to the trees that are lining the entrance. So, I mean, I would have thought that would have caused more damage to those trees than the new proposal that's going to have a car park that seems to be in line with National Trust guidelines. So, you know, I actually think that in terms of parking and cars being abandoned all over the place, that would be an improvement to how it is now. Because if we do nothing, it's going to continue. That noise and parking chaos will continue, if I'm not wrong. So, you know, I do think this could be actually an improvement to that. What else? One other thing I was just going to dispute was about the heritage harm, and I know Councillor Buckley already mentioned this, but I would dispute this, that it's a significant heritage harm, because I think it's actually the opposite. This building seems to be in need of preservation, and it seems that a lot of the plans were changed after we deferred it last time, because we requested quite a lot of changes, and things like you know, windows are no longer being removed, so a lot of the heritage of the building is actually being preserved. So, you know, I think I probably dispute that, and some of the things they're looking at doing in keeping the heritage in terms of the radar history and things like that, and definitely obviously trying to restore that chapel, because, you know, that's a benefit as well. So yeah, I would dispute some of the reasons anyway why we're rejecting it. Thank you.
I'm going to actually just let Councillor Luxon come in, because then everybody has spoken once, and then we'll go to officers.
Thank you, Jane. This sounds a very complicated application. I've sat in this one before, and we've gone through all this, and I do agree with a lot of the things that the councillors have said about, you know, things have to be looked at on both sides, and this is a heritage item place, and it has good things and bad things going to it, bad negatives and positives. And I have a bit of reservation here because of the planning policies that we put in place and we have to follow. And I also agree with many of the points that people have said, and I do sympathize with the residents for what's happening at the moment with the parking and everything that is happening. So I'm going to sit on it for a moment, and I'm sitting on the fence over here deciding what I should be doing. Definitely sitting on the fence, because there are positives and negatives in this, and I will wait and see what will take the better of me at the end of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we've had lots of discussions. There's probably a lot to come back on. I'll let you.
Thank you. So first of all, there's, I suppose, just a couple of sort of factual things to clarify. I think it's really important to bear in mind that while the site appears to currently be being used as a wedding venue, and that seems to be the occasions on which there are these particular issues with particularly the kind of pressures in terms of car parking, both on the access into the site and on the surrounding roads, that use at the moment doesn't have planning permission. So I think to compare what's proposed to that is not really a fair comparison. We have enforcement powers if, you know, following an investigation, and if it was decided that it was expedient to do so, the council does have powers to, you know, take enforcement action where there's an unlawful use occurring. And I think it's important to bear in mind as I explained at the beginning of my presentation, the current lawful use is as a conference venue. So I think when you're thinking about the impacts, particularly in terms of highways and impacts on residents, making a comparison between the lawful use as a conference venue for 250 delegates versus a hotel and wedding and conference venue with 500 guests, I think those are the kind of comparisons that need to be made rather than the current unlawful situation of the use as a wedding venue. I think just something else to clarify as well, something to just kind of bear in mind, the council has made it very clear that we're not objecting to the principle of a hotel use on the site. There are obviously concerns about the wedding venue use, but overall, as is discussed in the committee report, the principle of the development is not disputed. It's the fact that it's in the green belt, and it's the detail and the kind of scale and extent of the proposals as it discusses in the committee report. There's 15,000 square metres of built development, and that is, you know, as we discussed earlier, anything over 1,000 square metres has to be referred to Secretary of State if it's being approved. So, you know, we're not saying no, a hotel could never take place in this location. The exact proposals, the scale and extent of them is the issue that is, you know, particularly harmful. I think just to add to what Gillian said in relation to the community benefit of the Scout Hut and what weight is afforded to that, obviously Gillian was talking about any financial sort of contributions that might be made towards the Scout group outside of the provision of the Scout Hut. But I also just want to clarify the main sort of purpose of the provision of the Scout Hut is to achieve policy compliance. So the proposals would result in the loss of the existing Scout Hut, which it's acknowledged is a quite outdated building, but there are policies in the local plan that prevent the loss of community facilities, and that is what the re-provision would be doing. It would be complying with that policy. It's actually a smaller facility, and I think that's, you know, that's explained in detail in the committee report, that it's acknowledged that it's effectively the main purpose of providing that Scout Hut is to re-provide the Scout Hut that would be lost. It's acknowledged that it's a slightly smaller building, but it's obviously a modern standard, and so overall that's the rationale for why it's only given limited weight. And as a kind of general principle, policy compliance on its own isn't something that should necessarily be treated as a benefit. Going above and beyond policy compliance, obviously that can be treated as a benefit. Just a couple of other points in terms of the kind of discussion in relation to the heritage considerations. I think it's also worth stressing that as far as the case that we've received as part of the application, we aren't aware that the existing business on the site isn't viable. If that was a case that was being put forward, that's something that we could consider, and there's a, you know, a kind of particular route for considering enabling development to allow development in the setting or affecting heritage assets that wouldn't ordinarily otherwise be acceptable. That's not the case that's been put forward here, and I think in terms of thinking about the existing conditions of the listed buildings, we haven't seen any evidence that there's not a kind of viable business at the moment that would enable those to be brought back into a good standard. And as Alicia explained earlier and can say more on, you know, the council does also have powers to compel the owners of listed buildings to carry out repair works if that's deemed to be appropriate. And also just another point on the heritage, the sort of assessment of the heritage impacts, and I think this goes back to what Gillian was saying about being mindful of what the kind of rationale and justification is for coming to a different conclusion to what policy says, or indeed, you know, what's kind of set out in the committee report. I think particularly when it comes to assessing the heritage impacts, obviously, you know, there's a lot of material with the application, and there is a heritage assessment submitted by the applicants, and there's detailed comments from Alicia, the Conservation Officer, as well as statutory heritage consultees. And I think it's just important to bear in mind that that is a professional assessment that follows a kind of recognised methodology for the assessment of impacts to designated heritage assets that's informed by an understanding of their significance. And I think if a different kind of assessment or a different conclusion is to be reached about what those impacts are, that does need to be sort of justified and explained. I think I just wanted to say a couple of points as well, and this kind of goes back to the question of what the current lawful use of the site is, in terms of the potential for there to be improvements in terms of parking. As I say, obviously the current situation is unlawful in terms of the wedding venue use, but I think it's also important to note that the proposed development would result in quite a significant reduction in car parking compared to the existing parking within the site. There's 177 car parking spaces that would be proposed as part of development. Off the top of my head, the existing car parking, I think, is around 300 spaces within the site. So it is, I can check those figures, but it is quite a reduction. And then the final point I just wanted to make was in relation to conditions, and there have been a number of comments about whether kind of outstanding technical issues could be addressed by condition. Those comments related primarily to highways impacts and noise impacts, and I think this is kind of explained in paragraph 9.76 of the committee report, where it refers to the 5 tests that conditions have to meet as required in paragraph 56 of the MPPF. So in order to put any conditions on a decision makers need to be satisfied that any of those conditions comply with those 5 tests. In terms of reasonableness, that is one of the tests. And so I think as I say, it's discussed in detail in the section on amenity in the committee report. Really careful consideration has been given to whether using conditions would be a kind of acceptable route for mitigating those impacts, and the justification for why it's concluded that it couldn't be dealt with by a condition. It is set out in detail, and I think there's kind of 2 main parts to that. One is the marquee and the kind of lack of the noise impact assessment that's submitted with the application acknowledges that the marquee, if it wasn't mitigated, would give rise to significant impacts to amenity. And there's a discussion in the committee report about the fact that the kind of range of mitigation that's suggested as part of the noise impact assessment is not sufficiently clear to demonstrate that the noise levels could actually be reduced sufficiently to protect amenity. And the other point is in relation to the kind of noise and disturbance from vehicle movements. And again, I think imposing conditions that restricted that would undermine the actual operation of it as a wedding venue, and so it wouldn't be reasonable for us to do that. So again, in terms of thinking about how that relates to highways, the principal concern is in relation to the impact on the junction between A4 and Ditton Park Road, and that's to do with the vehicle movements associated with particularly the wedding venue use. The assessment is that we don't have enough information at the moment to assess the impact on that junction in terms of highway safety, and so that's not something that could be dealt with by condition, because such a condition would inevitably kind of unfairly restrict the capacity of the wedding venue and undermine it. I think that covers all the points that I wanted to raise. Just one other thing, just in response to Councillor Carpenter, the points that you made in relation to the green belt. I think in terms of the marquee, as you acknowledged, that the existing marquee isn't lawful, so that shouldn't be treated as kind of an existing structure in terms of the green belt impact. And obviously also in addition to those buildings that are proposed within the moated area, the accommodation block and the gym and back of house block, there's the marquee and the car park as well. And it's not, in terms of the kind of potential impacts on openness, it's not just from built structures, the physical presence of cars, the hard surfacing, the bollards, you know, even the kind of activity associated with the proposed uses that would be introduced into the site, those all have the potential to impact on openness. So, as I say, it's not just about the kind of volume of the buildings. And just one other point, it was in relation to the impact on ancient woodland. I think it's also, you referred to the fact that there's already a kind of concrete road through the ancient woodland. I think, again, it's important to stress that an existing feature that potentially, when it was introduced, might have been harmful to the ancient woodland doesn't justify causing further harm. And I just refer back to the wording in policy in paragraph 186 of the MPPF that says that development that would result in deterioration to ancient woodland should be refused unless there are wholly exceptional circumstances. Yeah, that was everything I wanted to cover. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wondered if a conservation officer would like to add anything at all, come back on any of the points made.
Just a couple of points that the points that were raised in terms of kind of the point about the 20th century history of the site and the radar history of the site. It's not unusual for a scheme like this for us to impose a building recording condition for the building and the site because of the change that would occur on this site. And so that would be a planning condition that we would apply, and the weight given to that shouldn't be given considerable weight because a building recording condition is not unusual on a consent of this sort. So yes, the applicant has highlighted that they would provide interpretation of the site and its more recent history. However, it could be kind of secured through a planning process as a condition due to the development scheme and the changes that will occur to the list of the building itself. It shouldn't be given considerable weight, as in it would only happen because of this development.
I was just going to ask if Alicia could possibly describe, because I think the term that's often used with heritage structures is less than substantial harm, and that sounds as if it's not important, that the harm that is being undertaken isn't important. But if Alicia could maybe comment on what the harm to the park and the structures is, and also what this term less than substantial harm means.
Yeah, so in the MPPF, in the framework, there are 3 levels of defined harm, and that is no harm, less than substantial, and substantial. In this case, we're sitting in the bracket of less than substantial. Policy does not dictate to scale within the bracket. However, it does dictate that the harm should be outweighed by public benefits. These benefits aren't solely heritage, they can be a broad scheme of benefits. However, you have to look into the detail of those benefits versus the harm caused. In this instance, we're looking at harm to a registered park and garden, a listed building, multiple listed buildings in this instance, as well as their setting. So it impacts to built fabric as well as setting to these multiple heritage assets. Less than substantial harm in its own right is less than substantial harm to the significance and setting of these assets. And on top of that, we have a duty, you have a duty as a decision maker to consider the Planning and the Building Act and the sections of preserving that significance and setting in that regard as well. So that less than substantial harm is one policy factor on top of the duty under statutory legislation to preserve the setting and significance of these buildings. And the less than substantial harm is on the setting and significance of these heritage assets. There is no kind of scale in between it to consider whether it is harmful or not in this case. Even a small amount of harm will still sit in the less than substantial brackets.
Chair, if I could just highlight, obviously in the report it sets out a whole discussion on the impact on the heritage assets and the objections that our own conservation officer have, but I would like to identify to members that the 2 statutory consultees for this site both the Gardens Trust and the Georgian, what's that society now, is it? It's a Jordan, whatever, group, yes, Georgian group, have both, from their specialist perspective, have both objected to the work, the development and proposals on this site. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I've got some more councillors waiting to speak. So David and then Sinara.
Well, thank you, Chair. I've got 3 points actually. Well, I'll bring them all up at once. Firstly, I just wanted to clarify with officers the use of the building in the past has been used by the MOD. And when we talk about historic and heritage, obviously we know that the MOD don't need planning permission to make changes to the building. They've made substantial changes over the decades to the property without planning permission, which has obviously could be deemed a significant harm to the property in the past. So in terms of being concerned about heritage and damage there, we have allowed this, or we have no other choice in that, but it's been done before. And these plans are, in some people's opinion, bringing this heritage and historic property back up to mark. In regards to conditions, and I'm notified to regards to concerns to residents, the noise limitations, we've spoke about conditions, and I think I disagree with officers. I think there can be conditions put in regards to noise limitations. I think there can be limits to the number of people and limit it to 450 rather than whenever. I think there can be limits put in place in regards to times. We could limit it to 10:30 with everyone leaving the area in the marquee by 11 p.m. I think in regards to the statutory consultees and the objections to highways, I think we could look at putting a condition in place by having a separate entrance to contain that without affecting the applicant's consideration and business model as put forward by officers. And I think the heritage and historic programme should be put into a condition in respect of the applicant has made that statement. And I think we should condition that to make sure that the historic history of the property, in particular to the invention of radar, which we wouldn't have come through and we wouldn't be sitting here now if that hadn't been invented. That is so substantial, it's beyond belief. So I think we can put a number of conditions in around this, and I think that they're one of the areas which mitigate the statutory obligations. In regards to trying to help other councils in regards to the green belt, I totally listed my very special circumstances, and in regards to Councillor Sharp's concerns about precedent in regards to Greenbelt, I'd like to see a property that's got this history, economic benefit, community benefits, offset of net gain, and a place that invented radar. And we've got conditions here which make it very particular. And Councillor Reynolds went on to state a number of these conditions that would make it a total different situation to any other green belt application that would happen anywhere in the borough, and I'd say anywhere in the UK. So I think we have seriously very special circumstances to look at approving this application. I don't agree we should defer to officers for application. I think we should approve it tonight, and my proposal is to approve this application tonight with these very special circumstances noted. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Luxton next.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question actually for the officers. Tonight, whether the planning permission is granted or rejected, it would still go to the Secretary of State, wouldn't it? Because it's 1,500 square meters. Is that right?
If it's rejected, it'll be refused and the decision will be out tomorrow. If members are minded to approve the application, it would go to the Secretary of State for both Greenbelt and heritage reasons, because you are going against the statutory expert consultees based on heritage. And as Sarah said earlier, it's the scale of the development that would result in it going to the Secretary of State. But it would be going with whatever the recommendation of this committee and the reasoning for that recommendation would be.
Can I come back on that? Yeah. So what if it's like you said, if it gets granted today, one way or the other, it would then go to the Secretary of State, and then it is in their hand to say a yes or no to the application, like how in the past it has happened. Am I right?
Yes, I mean, they would either, if they didn't, they might say, oh, yes, we absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
And then, we get it back.
So taking into consideration the special circumstances like what they are given to us, they could actually even go and say that was a good decision, or it could go the other way. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, I mean, it's up to them to make the decision.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to the debate, listened to the officers, and I've been doing a little bit of reading as well at the same time, it would appear that the park itself is also listed, and this is where the greater development is proposed to take place. It's a huge footprint, and when you compare this footprint to what is currently existing subject to planning consent, i.e. take the marquee out of it, it's massive. It's absolutely massive in this green belt. I personally would rather see an application come before us that looks at developing the house into a hotel or wedding venue, where we can look at the manor house being looked after well. We can preserve those wonderful historic things, not just from World War II, but going right the way back. This manor house is much older than just World War II. That's where the radar was invented, and that's amazing. And that is something that we should treasure and we should be very proud of. But for me, I think the development of the house for something that would be used for the community and preserve the historic facilities there would be a far easier application to consent to, because that would also preserve that ancient wood. It would preserve the lime trees and all the biodiversity that goes on in a beautiful greenbelt area. And that said, we have this application before us. We don't have the application that I would like to see. And so as such, we do have to make our decision based on what's before us. And hearing that there would be no reason why a separate application couldn't come back with regard to just the house, I would be inclined to propose that we go with officer's recommendation. Because
so I just say Councillor Sharp has already proposed
then
that.
I'll second it. I'll second it. Yeah, okay. Because we're looking at having to add so many conditions to make this fit what we want it to fit. This application does not fit what we're saying we want, and as such, I think we need to reject it. Firstly,
Councillor Thing, you are next to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to just come back on Councillor Costa's comment on the application. I mean, the application is the application, what we've got in front of us. The marquee is a temporary building. In an ideal world, it'd be brilliant to sort of, turn the house into a wedding venue. But the issue we've got is at the moment, officers are saying, they don't even want one of the rooms subdivided, the rooms that we went into yesterday, and they've got concerns about that. And to turn the actual manor house into a wedding venue would be another application, and going through this process all over again, and it may not come about. So that was the point I wanted to come back on the green belt argument as well. There's some confusion, I think, about the green belt and what the purpose is of the green belt. And I just want to just go to the definition in paragraph 143 of the NPPF, and in it says green belt serves 5 purposes. A, to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas. B, to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another. C, to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. D, to propose the setting and special character of historic towns. And E, to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of derelict and other urban lands. I don't see this application encroaching on that at all. And the benefits that this scheme is providing us are huge, absolutely huge. I mean, if this was anywhere else in the borough and an applicant proposed a refurbishment of their site, and they offered the community a scout hut, a gym facility, a sauna, I mean, we would bite their hand off for it. This is a huge benefit, and it may not come back. And the other thing is regarding the enforcement of listed status. I mean, and the marquee's been up there for several years. That's not been enforced. Why is that still up? It's not been enforced, and it won't be enforced. Don't know. Maybe some point in the future, maybe, but I don't know. Now, the other thing is about the listed status. There is a building in Eton High Street, and is called the Cockpit. That building is a listed building, got great big timbers up there in the roof, and there were probably trees around when William the Conqueror was around. That building is derelict, and it's half finished building project. There's been pigeons flying around there. There's a file about that big with contraventions. There's not been any enforcement there. Borough hasn't taken the site off. It's very difficult to enforce this. That a chapel there is in an awful state. We've got an opportunity now where we can regenerate that area, give it a breath of fresh air. The whole area, that green area, the parkland, is described here as poor condition. We've got an opportunity this evening to defer and delegate. That's what I'm proposing. 2 officers. We can go through the conditions, and we put it back to officers. We're the decision making. We're the councillors here this evening. We're elected on behalf of residents. We've got decision making power here, not the officers. Officers can guide us, but it's down to us. And I've been here many times. And the other thing as well is, if we refuse this application this evening, there could be concern that if the applicant goes to appeal, costs could be awarded against the borough. Because we've already seen in the last 24 hours, at least one of the, or is it 2 conditions that have been, reason for refusal have been knocked off. I'm going to propose to defer and delegate, subject to section 106 agreement and the 278 and the conditions, and I can run through the conditions with officers if someone's happy to second proposal. Thank you.
Julian, we'll go to you, and then I'll ask Gillian to come back on some of the points that Gertch made.
Yes, can I just where to start? Goodness me, there's a lot to be said here. First of all, let me just say, well, what will happen if we approve here? What will happen? One of the things that has been said is that it will go to the Secretary of State, and I think that's been held out as it'll go to the Secretary of State, and that'll be sort of really bad. No, that is unlikely. It's in practice that has tended to be a bit of a rubber stamp, the Secretary of State, and there's sort of no, as I understand it, there's sort of no comeback on us if they disagree with us. On the other hand, I'm going to actually don't worry about this. I'm going to almost say something that the officers might be likely to say, which is that if we reject this, I think that because they the officers put such a comprehensive case together, it's likely that it won't be sort of seen as an unreasonable thing. So I'd sort of support officers there. But what I will also say is I've just observed that I think we've heard probably a lot more from officers today than we have from the councillors. And this is not the officers' fault. This is just an observation that the officers do an enormous amount of work. They provide all of the the hundreds of pages that we've looked through, that we've poured through. They present it before the meeting, they present it during the meeting, they answer questions and all that thing. But what they are not here to do is make a decision. They are not here to make a decision. That is for us councillors, and we are allowed to. We are allowed to make a decision. And so just to sort of a couple of the things that the officers did say, and one of the things that we heard that there was no, if we say no tonight, well, there's it's a wedding venue now. There's no planning permission, and we've got powers. We've got powers to do something about it. There's no evidence we've seen that we could not bring it back. We've got powers to compel the repair works here. Well, I'm sorry, but we need to move into the real world. We need to move into the real world here, because in practice, how was it 2-3 years it's been up there and nothing's happened. In practice, we know what will happen to that site. It will fall into a state of disrepair. We know in practice that all of the things that actually all of the things that we've seen, the carnage of the sort of the Wild West that we've seen, that will continue. We know that the economic benefit, that there is a clear economic benefit, and I won't say it again. I would actually, listening to Councillor Sharp, I really appreciate what he said. Actually, I just pick up something he said. He said that he would love to see this if it was not in the Greenbelt. That's fair, yes. We'd love, if there was such a thing. And I sort of agree. I think we've heard a lot from of just reiterating that this is incongruous, that there's a heritage harm, and actually completely disagree with that. Completely disagree with this idea that it's actually this will enhance this. Now, on the Greenbelt, that again, just to reiterate, it is all, and I think this was said earlier and it's been repeated a few times, this is all about the very special circumstances. Well, the bar is indeed high. It is very rare that council officers will say, you know what, this is in the Greenbelt, but there are very special circumstances because X, Y, Z, and we therefore suggest you approve. That's very, very rare. And so the officers, we cannot criticise them here. They've done the right thing. They've done the right thing in pointing out, look, this is a substantial harm. And they have been, to be fair, they've then said, but look, and it is then about a waiting thing, and it is for you to decide. And as I think we've said, that we believe that there are the very special circumstances. I think that in terms of noise, that I think there's obviously sill, there's signage, there's curfew. I wouldn't be specific about the time. I'd say let's just let's not make us that specific on that. Councillor Buckley, I would be sort of minded to support your sort of proposal, but actually I think that we do need the section 106. So I think I'm minded to second Councillor Gurch Singh's proposal to go against officers' recommendations and approve this. Subject, what you said? Yeah. Subject to the
106 to 78 and conditions. Yeah. So we just fire and delegate. What we do this evening, we just fire and delegate it to officers.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And the one final thing. Yes. And just the one final thing, as I said, this is, I think, it's again just going back to something that Councillor Costa said. I understand it is a head and heart thing. I would just say, look, I think this is what we have in front of us is good, and it's understandable that officers have sort of suggested the way they have. but we do have this very special circumstances clause, which allows us to say, well, actually, we believe these exist.
Okay. So we are approaching nearly 2 hours discussion on this, and I understand why it's really important. Do any members feel that they haven't had the opportunity to say anything that they would like to on this? Yeah.
So if we reject this, we're probably going to come back with an amended proposal, and if we're able to delegate, we're going to come back with a proposal. What is the practical difference?
Okay. So I'll come to Gillian to answer a couple of points. Thank you.
I need to start with the issue of the green belt. And Councillor Singh, I picked out a particular part of the policy, but it's very important that there's a clear understanding by members as to what green belt policy is, because you must have an understanding of the policy to make a decision. And yes, there are the aspects that of greenbelt policy, the 5 purposes of the policy, and it's very difficult to say that that this development does not encroach, because it's in the greenbelt, it's built form, by its very nature, it encroaches. So taking that one aside, and I think there are other aspects as to whether you could discuss various aspects of those 5 purposes, but really absolutely core is paragraph 152 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which says inappropriate development, and this is inappropriate development. It does not fall in the definition of anything that is appropriate, therefore it is inappropriate. Inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the green belt and should not be approved in very special circumstances. And all the case law, every appeal decision you read on the green belt will refer to impact on the openness of the green belt. And this because of the built form and the scale and the urbanising features like car parks and footpaths and roads, all of that have an impact on the openness of the green belt. So any decision you make, you have to make it with that in your mind. In terms of the conditions...
Councillors, can I ask you to stop talking amongst yourselves, please, and listen just for a minute? Thank you.
In terms of conditions, I think we've been really clear. The conditions that are being proposed or that have been mentioned would not meet the tests. They would not meet the tests required of a condition. They would not be reasonable, and they would not be on that basis enforceable. They would therefore be challengeable, and they could be challengeable by appeal. And so that's advice that we would have to give. We would have to give that advice that what is being proposed is not reasonable. When it comes to the issue of, yes, it is up to members, and it is a member's decision. Well, it's a member's decision as to what then potentially goes to the Secretary of State, but it is a member's decision. But you as a committee must act as a reasonable decision maker. So if you are going to depart from the weightings and the balancing of the issues, then you will need to be clear in your description of how that is differently weighted. And as was said earlier, it isn't just a case of saying, oh well, it just slightly pips, the benefits just slightly pip the post of the harms. It needs to be clear. It needs to be clear. But that's, I don't know, I mean, there are legal issues here, and I don't know whether...
I would like to just go to Helena, actually, because so we have one proposal that's been seconded to accept officer recommendations, and then we have a proposal then from Councillor Singh, which has been seconded, but I'm not totally clear on exactly what the proposal is.
I can give you the proposal.
Thank you. So the proposal is to defer and delegate, subject to the conditions, and I'll give you the conditions, and subject to section 106 and the 278. So right, so the condition which I want to run through is in the report, section 9.72, regarding the HIA process. That one I want secured by way of condition. So that's a heritage research and recording work. In the report, it says it can be secured by condition. So I'd like that to be secured and added on as a condition. Secondly, 9.75, the amendments of the scheme do not materially alter the proposals in respect of impacts of the development on residential amenity as set out in paragraph 10.99. And this is regarding antisocial behaviour. That one in the report, it says security measures which can be secured by condition. I'd like that added on as a condition. So that will be delegated to officers to agree that with the applicants. Then I would like to have the section 106 legal agreement secured as a condition. And the section 278 works, I'd like that secured as a condition additional. Additionally, 9.99, it says is regarding the AIR. The applicant is also proposing that a parkland restoration and management plan is secured by condition. I'd like that to be added on as a condition as well. So that's very important. That's for the ancient woodland technical note. Then I would like I'd like a condition to be added, 9.127 on your ecology and biodiversity is paragraphs 10.117, but subject to conditions securing a CEP and invasive and non-native species method statement and biodiversity gain plan, details of ecology, sensitive lighting, the proposals. So all of that stuff. Basically, the construction environment management plan, I want that all secured by condition. Construction management plan, I want secured as a condition. The clearance of vegetation, section 278, we'll stick that on as a condition. And yeah, an updated draft travel plan. Basically a final travel plan. I want that secured as a condition, please. There's will be a lot of conditions on this.
I wonder if there's a more efficient way of doing this. Potentially, I think we should take the vote on the first motion that we have, and because it may become immaterial.
If I can, I was just going to say also, obviously, just the reason it's obviously come to committee as well is it can't be delegated to the head of planning, as I understand it. So just to be very clear on what your proposal is, if I can, councillor, so because you say defer and delegate, so just want to make sure that we're very clear on what you are proposing.
Defer and delegate.
But it can't be, when you say delegate, sorry, that's where I'm taking issue, because it can't be delegated to the head of planning to make a decision.
Yes.
So are you proposing to defer and bring it back to committee?
No, I don't want it back to a committee because we can't take up valuable committee time for this. This is the second time it's been
but the head of planning doesn't have delegated powers to make the decision. That's the issue.
We want to delegate authority.
But you can't do that under the constitution.
Okay, we want to approve it subject to conditions.
Right. Okay. So could we move to take a vote on the first motion? Yes. Yeah.
I just wanted to respond to a couple of points that came up. Just to clarify, there was reference to SIL. This development wouldn't pay SIL if it was approved. It's not SIL liable. I can't remember who it was who mentioned that, but it's not. It wouldn't be SIL liable, so SIL wouldn't be charged. And just a point in relation to the marquee, I think you referred, Councillor Singh, to the fact that it's a temporary building. Just to clarify, technically it's a temporary structure, but it would be granted planning permission permanently. It wouldn't be a temporary grant of planning permission.
Thank you. Okay. Now, 9.146.
Councillor Singh, can we take the vote on the first one, and then if that falls, then we can finish the long list of conditions. I think that would be the reasonable thing to do, because otherwise you're going to have to list them all and it'll be naught.
Then the reason, sorry, the reason why I wanted to do it, because you may have some councillors here who have got certain concerns, which I will address with my conditions. And it may sway the vote, because someone minded to refuse it because they're concerned about noise. Well,
Okay, how many more conditions do you think you have that you wish to add on?
I think about 2 more. Let me.
Okay.
Can I also just clarify something in relation to conditions that are kind of referred to in the committee report? Those are referred to or described where it is deemed that harmful impacts could be mitigated by conditions. So the conditions you referred to, for example, the draft travel plan, the construction environment management plan. If there was to be a decision to approve the application, there would be further conditions that would be required that would need to be drawn up to address the other harms that are identified. Additional conditions would need to be drafted above those that are referred to in the report to mitigate those harms, just to clarify that.
Above the ones I'm giving you, yeah? Okay, so we can go through that as well. Now, the other condition is, right, I'd like a condition added on to secure the car park parking management plan. So that's very important for it takes the vehicles off site, keeps them on site. I'd like signage displayed around the site to respect neighbours and let people know about noise and nuisance. To keep the noise down when they're entering and exiting the site. And I think that is it. Unless anybody wants
Councillor Singh, do you, as the officers just said, do you have conditions that are in addition to the ones in the report to mitigate the harm? If you need some time to think about that, maybe we can just take the vote.
Do officers want to make any suggestion of any additional conditions?
I think we've, in our recommendation, we've made it clear that where we believe things could be addressed by condition, that's set out in the report.
Okay.
Where we don't think it can be addressed by condition, we've come to the conclusion that there would be harm and that conditions can't mitigate that harm.
Okay, in that case, that will be all my conditions that I'll be adding.
Okay.
Thank you. That's a lot of conditions there. We haven't put that many conditions on an application this year.
Okay, thank you. So, Mikey, could you just take us back to where we are so that everybody knows exactly what the vote is going to be taken for? Thank you.
So this vote is for the full application, not for the listed building consent. That's a separate vote. So this is just for the full application. The motion, is to refuse the planning permission with the reasons identified in section 13 of the report. It has been proposed by Councillor Sharp, seconded by Councillor Da Costa. I will take a name vote whether you are for refusing planning, against refusing planning, or abstaining from the vote. With that in mind, Councillor Buckley.
So just to repeat that, Mark,
No worries. Yeah. So it's to refuse the planning permission in line with officer recommendation with the conditions listed in section 13 of the report. The vote is for refusal, against refusal, or abstaining from the vote.
Against.
Councillor Carpenter.
Against.
Councillor Da Costa.
For.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Luxton.
For.
Councillor Sharp.
For.
Councillor Singh.
Against.
Councillor Amy Teasey.
For.
Councillor Julian Teasey.
Against.
So that is 5 votes for and 4 against. So the motion carries, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody, members and officers, for the time consideration.
It's still got to be the listed building. This still needs to.
Oh, yeah.
We still need to continue because we still haven't received a motion for the listed building.
So Councillor Singh's motion has fallen away, but we do need to now vote on the listed building consent. Councillor Buckley. Okay, yeah. Sorry, question. You just wanted to go straight to the motion, okay. So Councillor Da Costa is proposing
that we go in line with officers' recommendations at this time.
Thank you, and Councillor Sharp is seconding. Thank you, Mikey.
One second. Wording correct. So this is for the listed building consent vote. It is proposed by Councillor Da Costa, seconded by Councillor Sharp, to refuse listed building consent for the reasons identified in section 12 of the report. The vote is for refusal, against refusal, or abstaining from the vote. With that, Councillor Buckley.
Against.
Councillor Carpenter.
Against.
Councillor Da Costa. Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Luxton.
For.
Councillor Sharp.
For.
Councillor Singh.
Against.
Councillor Amy Teasey.
For.
Councillor Julian Teasey.
Against.
That is 5 votes for, 4 against, so the motion carries, Chair.
Thank you. And so once again, thank you to all members and officers for your time this evening and the a lengthy debate, but getting into issues. Yes, Councillor Buckley. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, certainly. And we are, we're 9 o'clock, so we will have a quick break. Some offers are going to, If you would like to stay and listen to the next item, please do, but take a seat and we can get on, because it's going to be a late one as it is. Thank you. Okay, so we've slightly changed the order this evening, just to make things run a little bit easier. So we're going to go to the last item that was on the agenda there, which is the crushed concrete at Hythe Farm, Fowles crushed concrete at Hythe Farm. And thank you. It's Nick who's going to introduce this item.
Hello, everybody. This application is for the Fowles crushed concrete site in Wraysbury. Yeah, sorry, can you hear me, Nick? Yeah.
Pull it forward. Yeah.
Right, sorry, I'll start again. Is that better? Okay. This application is for the Fowles crushed concrete site in Wraysbury. The proposal is for the replacement of the hard standing with concrete surfacing, maintenance access and drainage infrastructure associated with the lawful storage and processing of waste material in the northwestern area of the site of the existing waste recycling facility. The reason the application is before you this evening is because it's a major development as defined by being waste development, and the Constitution requires such applications to come to the Planning Committee. Furthermore, Councillor Larkham called the application into committee due to the fact the area is in a floodplain. This is a resubmission of an application that was originally submitted in July 2023. There was a single reason for refusal. That single reason refusal related to the design of the surface water storage area would have been used for stockpiling of materials, which reduced the area available for surface water to be stored. The absence of acceptable surface water storage strategy resulted in the development failing policy DM10 of the Central and Eastern Berkshire Joint Minerals and Waste Plan. The application is in the red area before you on the screen there. The wider site is in blue. The entirety of the area is in the green belt, and also the large proportion of it is within flood zone 3B. There are TPO trees around the perimeter of the site. The area for consideration this evening is circa 0.5 hectares, or 7% of the entirety of the overall site. And the access to the site retains to be via Feathers Lane in purple in the top left corner. This is an aerial image of the site. Clearly, the development takes place inside the tree line perimeter, and the site in question is in the red in the northwestern corner. The Thames is shown to the south. Hythe and Farm Road is on the right-hand side of the screen. Feathers Lane, the access to the proposed development, is in the northwest corner, and Ferry Lane is to the east of the site. There is a need for this application because the environmental permit requires there to be an impermeable surface for processing waste relating to demolition waste and dredging waste, to ensure that there's no infiltration into the ground of contaminants. The application is deemed to overcome a single reason for refusal. There are no statutory consultee objections to the application. Some images before you. This indicates the existing site layout. Stockpiling on site is evident. Equally, the surface water is on site there, and that would be similar to what is proposed. It's notable that in the bottom right corner there is a enclosed bund that encompasses the entirety of the site. This was approved in 2003 via a lawful development certificate, and that is not up for debate this evening. So the proposal is on the left-hand side. It's a far smaller surface water drainage area than what was previously considered. It's also deeper in nature. So the proposed surface water area is 19% of the overall slab, rather than the 49% that was the previous version. The required storage for the development is 910 square metres, and they provided over that at 1,032 square metres. So development's considered to comply with policy DM 10 of the Central Midlands Berkshire Joint Minerals and Waste Plan. There's some additional photographs for context. This shows some stockpiling on site. This is a conveyor belt from the south of the site, which imports some of the waste to the host area. Again, some undertaking of the operations on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so we do have 3 speakers on this item, starting with the public representative, Reginald Marsh. Would you like to come forward? So you have 3 minutes, and the time begins when you start speaking. You just need to press the button in front of them. It'll be a 1-minute warning as well.
This site was designated as highest level of flood zone, a 3B. A lot of it is no longer a 3B, with the resultant increase in flood levels, minimum 5 centimetres. But it is on planning aspects that we need to show this application is flawed. So I hope you got my fuller brief, which I will praise. Undefined chamber capacity. The sump or chamber is the major factor of flood mitigation, but in the report it is undefined. We know it has to accommodate, as shown, 1085 cubic metres capacity referenced on page 25. But all that we can see shown are 2 dimensions, 1.2 by 1.5 metres, which clearly the capacity is 0. If you calculate the 3rd dimension against cubic metres, it is 602.7 metres, which I presume is not the depth. On this parameter alone, the flood risk assessment fails. Transportation and wheeler tankers. One of the other mitigation proposals is through tankering water and taking it off-site. The flood risk assessment does not define numbers, capacity, operations or protocols, or where the other site is. Further, it does not define when they would be used and whether the operation is feasible 365 days a year. This again means the flood risk assessment fails to deliver a practical, usable solution to remove surface water when most needed. Lack of specification for dust suppression. If the sump was defined, then the flood risk assessment states that some of the water will be used for dust suppression. And again, no stated volume or how much goes back into surface water. Again, this part of the flood risk assessment is inadequate. Omission of existing underground chambers on site. The flood risk assessment does not acknowledge the existence of other underground chambers to take the surface water from other hard standing. The whole site needs to be looked at and how the additional element
1 minute remaining.
and depends on levels, gradient and flow of the surface water. In isolation, we do not understand the overall impact on the site. Again, the flood risk assessment fails. Previous flood risk assessment inconsistencies. If we look at the flood risk assessment from 2017, it highlights several unknowns to the current drainage arrangements. Quoting from page 19, 2 collector chambers of unknown size, the pipe sizes and gradient are unknown, the depth of the chamber is unknown, the exact dimensions of the tanks are not known. These are further reasons why the current application cannot be looked at in isolation. The flood risk assessment is 170 pages for a reason. They know the pressure planning are under and the constraints they face. We had an engineer look at this and they stipulate that it's a cut and paste tick box, inadequate on all levels and standards and a
3
waste
minutes,
of paper.
Chair.
Under the flood risk assessment, I would suggest that none of you can look us in the eye and say that this additional hard standing will not add to the flooding risk that we already have seen increase.
Thank you.
We are
I'll
shooting to protect us.
I'll stop you there. Thank you very much. Okay. And then for the applicant, we have Guy Titman. Thank you. Again, 3 minutes and 1 minute warning.
Thank you, Chair, Councillors. The planning application for you is very simple.
It is the resubmission of a planning application which was refused in July 2013, which the applicant considers was based on highly belated and flawed reasoning. This planning application is to construct a concrete surface with a sealed drainage system, either at or below ground level, in the northwestern area of the site, such that certain waste already accepted at the site can be stored and processed pursuant to conditions of the environmental permit. This is not a planning application for the waste storage and processing operations themselves, as they are already consented. It is simply to make changes to an area site surfacing. The planning application has been submitted with minor revisions to the previously proposed scheme, not because the applicant considers they are necessary, but because it is a pragmatic approach to get planning permission over the line. Although there have been a series of objections to the development from local residents and an objection from Wraysbury Parish Council, there are no objections to the development from the statutory or technical consultees, including the Environment Agency, the lead local flood authority, Environmental Protection and the Highway Authority. The key issues for consideration have been identified in the committee report and include the principle of the development, the location of the site in the Greenbelt, climate change and sustainability, flood risk, environmental protection, highway and parking, and ecology and biodiversity. All these issues have been addressed by the applicant in the planning application, and in summary, and in the absence of objections from the statutory or technical consultees, it is explained in the committee report that none of these key issues are grounds for refusal of the application. The majority of the objections from local residents and the objection from Wraysbury Parish Council relate to flood risk. The need to consider flood risk was identified by the applicant, and a detailed flood risk assessment was included with the planning application. It is concluded in the detailed flood risk assessment that there will be no loss in fluvial floodplain capacity, and a proposed scheme will not create flood flows. Therefore, there will be no effect on flood risks of third-party land. As explained above, the Environment Agency and the lead local flood authority are not objecting to the planning application. The applicant has worked with the planning authority to review planning conditions, including pre-commencement conditions. There have been some minor changes to the conditions, but these minor changes do not impact on the reasons for or the objectives of the conditions. The recommendation before you is to authorise the head of planning to grant planning permission subject to the planning conditions. This approach is supported by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, we have Councillor Larkham. Again, you have 3 minutes and you'll be given a 1 minute warning.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad I called this one in because otherwise we wouldn't have potential objectors here. It would have just been rubber stamped. I urge you to defer your decision on this and to go and actually have a look at what is going on there. You have in front of you a little planning application for a little bit of concrete. But the issue is far wider, far broader than that. It is the nuisance, the cumulative nuisance of what is happening here. Many, many hundreds of lorry movements a day along residential roads. Absolutely, totally inappropriate. This place has grown like topsy from Greenbelt on floodplain adjacent to the Thames. It was a farm when I was young. And now there are enormous earth embankments, so you can't even see, that restrict the overland flow of water. They should not be there. The whole thing is absolutely out of control. Anyway, I have no decision to make here. You will make the decision. You will live with it. I ask you to defer it. And actually, it's called management by walking around, by going there and looking at what is going on. And I learned that 50 years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so I will open it to members for debate. Who'd like to go first? Yep, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously listening to the public speaker and the representative for the applicant and the local ward councillor. I'd just like to point out that, you know, when the applicant states that there's no statutory objections, it's not quite true according to the report that I'm reading. So if officers can be clear, there are statutory consultees that have not objected, but what it's not objected on the basis of conditions being set. Now, these conditions are very, very clear, and one of them is based on free from storage area. Now, one of the things we considered when we looked at this application before was the ability for officers, after an application like this is either approved or in this particular case, if it's recommended for approval, and it's very similar to the last application we met, it's the ability for our council to actually enforce or deal with these issues after they're done. Now, in regards to the statutory consultee, local flood authority, basing his no objection on the basis it's free from storage area, I raise it as an issue because, and I think Councillor Larkham is quite right, I think you need to get a basis of these sites, and I think if the officers could bring up pictures of the site in its current situation of working, that would be very, very helpful to get some sort of understanding of how a large site like this works. And as we've said, there are, and I've seen this myself in many different other locations, hundreds of lorries and thousands of tonnage going out of this place. It's very, very difficult for officers, unless you're there for 24 hours a day, to manage and oversee a site like this. It's physically impossible. So once you look at this application, you see that you could stockpile material on this. I think that you have to look at how this would be managed by the local authority on the basis that the statutory consultees have said, you know, this needs to be free from storage. We've looked at the bunds that are also around the site, which is 3 metres high, and coming from an area that suffers flooding annually, and my property actually floods on an annual basis, I can actually tell you that flood water doesn't necessarily come from a river, it comes from under the ground. And if none of you have experienced flooding, you need to probably understand that the water table around this site is probably 10 miles across either side, so 20 miles in diameter. And there's no way you can stop that water coming up from underneath and dispersing to other properties. So if you place a ton of material on that site or in that place, then the water will go somewhere else and it will disperse onto other properties. So I'm recommended to have deep concerns about this application, purely on, you know, we are in flood zone 3B, which is, you know, one of the highest levels. And the more we put into this, no matter how little, it will have a detrimental effect somewhere else. In regards to the representation from the residents, I'd like officers' guarantees and commitment that a cubic capacity has been proven in this application, as they've raised this issue, that the dimensions aren't satisfactory in the flood risk assessment. So we need guarantees that there is the suitable there when this application doesn't actually show it, if the representatives are correct. But my main concern is just how you manage this site 24 hours a day to make sure there is no stockpiling in this area. And it's in the applicant's interests to stockpile because that's where they make their money. So you're really in a position whereby, in my opinion, unless you can guarantee you can enforce this 24 hours a day, this application should be refused. But I'll leave it to other comments and considerations by the panel before I draw a conclusion and make a motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Councillor Carpenter?
Hi, yeah, so thank you for the speakers and thank you for the information. I would just say that obviously, you know, we deferred this last time, right? Or did we reject it?
Sorry, Councillor Carpenter, we refused this,
Yeah,
the
that's right.
previous
Okay,
application.
so we refused it, but we asked for some, you know, amendments to be made, and those amendments look like they've been made. So, you know, I don't know that we can really object to those on the basis of last time we said, well, it was, you know, it was in the flood zone and there was too much, you know, at risk. So, you know, it looks to me like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. So those amendments have been made. So I think it's going to be difficult for us to reject it again because we did ask for that, and that's been done. So.
Councillor Da Costa.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got one question. So if you keep the slide up. So on the right-hand side, the image there shows the blue taking up probably 2/3 of the area. And then on the other side, we're looking at just a slither at the bottom. Now, is that because we're saying before the new, don't know what you call them, tanks, wells, whatever they are underneath the ground, before they put in place, that's how much area the surface water needed to take up before causing flooding, and therefore less area is for stockpiling, or is it that there'll be no stockpiling? That's what I can't quite get my head around. Thank you.
Yeah, let's just go to Councillor Davis and then I'll for some clarification. Thank you.
So I'm just trying to get an idea of the scale of it. Concrete slab, 5,175 meters squared. Squared to about 72. So I think visualize it at 72 meters by 72 meters, if that helps. If that gets flooded, but if there's a flood event and the whole thing's covered in water, but the material stored would displace water, that would increase flooding elsewhere. I can't quite get a sense of it, but 70 meters by 70 meters seems like a negligible amount, especially if the slab is now under the level that it was previously. So it would take away some. I just want to put that out there and let others think about it and add to it.
Any other members have any questions or queries before I go to officers to ask on those? No? Okay, Nick, would you be able to come back on those points, please?
Yes, by all means, Chair. Dealing with the first point in terms of the size of the underground storage chamber that was raised by the objector, there is an update sheet that mentions that was clarified by the applicant. I presume members have read the update sheet, but essentially those dimensions are given by the applicant and they have been given in an email, I believe it was the 20th of February.
I think sorry, is this in the update that came through today, this afternoon?
Yes.
Yeah, members may not have seen it if they were working, so could you just let them know what it is?
Okay. Yeah, there is an update sheet that was circulated earlier today, and within that there is mention of the clarification of the size of the underground storage chamber. And that was previously given to us on the 20th of February. If members are specifically concerned about that, I see no reason why you couldn't put a condition to stipulate the dimensions, the precise dimensions of that feature to be submitted to and agreed in writing before installation. In the grand scheme of things, the capacity of that underground storage chamber is 20 cubic meters, whereas the overall storage area is 1,032 cubic meters, which is well and above the required 910 cubic meters. So we are 122 cubic meters over where the maximum storage should be at. And that's designed for a 1 in 100 plus 40% climate change 7-day continuous flooding event. So there is a considerable freeboard built into the proposed design. The image on the left-hand side, just leading on to a second question on stockpiling. There will be no stockpiling on the left-hand side image in dark blue or light blue. And officers think that is a realistic expectation, given the size of it is far reduced from the previous proposal, and also because the size has decreased, it's increased in depth. So there will be a noticeable slope in that area, which would make it not the most suitable location for stockpiling in the first instance. And obviously there is a separate environmental permit that is running that maximises the amount of stockpiling that can take place on that site. So all these things combined, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the statutory consultees, in particular the LLFA, we have a much more manageable scheme here that conditions can suitably control.
Any other comments? Yeah, Councillor Buckley.
Okay, just coming back on a couple of points. That supplementary document that we received this afternoon, has the statutory consultees been able the ability to respond to that? Have they had time and have they responded after this supplementary document has been received?
Well, there was nothing supplementary that the LLFA or the statutory consultee was not aware of. It was clarification on matters within the report. So that element related to the size of the capacity of the underground storage chamber. I think I was also made aware of an email sent late last night to members where there are a series of questions, one of which related to the size of the underground chamber not being given. So part of that update this morning was actually it has been given. It's not within the flood risk assessment, but it has been given via email from the author of the flood risk assessment, dated the 20th of February.
Gillian, just come in. Thank you.
I only wanted to make one comment. Is there has been quite a lot of comments from certainly from the speakers about the general nature of the site and the amount of activity on the site. That isn't before members today. It's already a local site. That was.
Okay, looking around, just trying to catch everyone's eye, just to make sure there's nobody else that wants to ask anything. No. Go, Councillor Buckley.
Sorry, I just wanted to come back on to a point in regards to Devon's point on size. I think I'm probably very sensitive about this, but I'm because I flood every year, and I think if people aren't really understanding what flooding is, it is a very serious nature, and that's why this is flood zone 3B and not for any other reason. Any additional change to this would have serious consequences elsewhere. And I think the local flood authority's clear point that there's no objection subject to this to be free. I'm just going to read out their point. Is a free space. Their non-objection is based upon there being no free space. There being free space. However, how do you manage to stockpiling? And I know I get the officer's point on slope. It doesn't take much tonnage of stockpiling to remove a slope and then just build up straight on top of it. The concerns here is, will there be stockpiling? That was one of our concerns going back to Councillor Carpenter's reasons for refusal. Originally, one of our concerns was our ability to enforce this and manage this site, and what pressure it will put on officers and enforcement to do that. And I think that, so just to refer everyone to the original refusal, one of the deep concerns was our ability to manage this once it's approved. But I think in regards to stockpiling, unless you're watching it 24 hours a day, you're not going to be able to manage stockpiling unless you either accept it or you don't accept it. That's my main point. So I'll close for the officer to come back. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the concerns, Councillor, and I think they're very valid. And I've read all of the comments that we got from local residents. But when we talk about keeping that area free of stockpiling, I do think that is a realistic expectation. One of the reasons for that is that this image here shows you the existing conveyor belt coming from the south of the site. South of the site collects the recycled material, and then that is brought into this area, which is this would be the dark blue area. If we go back a couple of slides. So the dark blue, if you look on that slide on the left-hand side, if you see in the bottom left, there's a yellow line coming into the area. Okay, that is this feature. And as you can see, there's a lot of infrastructure there in situ, and it's their operational business to ensure that that is going to be clear of stockpiling, and any stockpiling that is going to be there is going to be cleared on a daily basis. Otherwise, they simply couldn't function as a business with the features coming in, with the waste coming in from the south. So the fact that it's reduced quite significantly in size and the infrastructure is already in place, I think it's a realistic expectation that's going to be free from stockpiling.
Okay, can I come back to those two pictures? They're very important. Can you go back to the purple picture with the yellow stripe, please? 2 screens ahead, I think. That one there, yeah. So the yellow stripe is that piece of apparatus that transfers the material into that area, correct? Yeah. So we can go back to the main picture, which shows it in real life. Can I just clarify, is that stockpiling that I see there that's on that area?
What happens is on a daily basis, a significant amount of waste comes into that site area, and it is distributed. It then goes into a trommel and it's blended down into smaller material. That smaller material then goes onto the stockpile. So it wouldn't be in the company's interest to stockpile in the one area where the waste comes in. That is, from my understanding of being on site and talking to the applicant, that is removed on a daily basis, and I've no reason to dispute that.
I think the evidence speaks volumes to me, to be perfectly frank. And greatest we're in the world, we're managing this 24 hours a day. I don't see how you manage this site. It's a very, very fast moving operation. And when you're flooding, there can be, looking at that there now, there's probably, I don't know how many hundreds of tons worth of stockpiling there in the evidence there. So I have deep concerns over this application. And I think the panel should be concerned about our ability, one, to enforce it, to be able to manage it. I appreciate the officer's comments in regards to being the best interest of the company, but this is sometimes the problem. The best interest of the company don't suit the best interests of the residents and the borough. So I think we need to understand if there's going to be conditions here, are we going to be able to enforce them? And secondly, so my proposal is, and I'll be very frank, just on the evidence we've seen today, the information in regards to what's been put before us. I feel very uncomfortable with this application, and I think the rest of the panel should be asking themselves if they feel this can be managed. We are in flood zone 3B, and flooding is particularly difficult. I've spoke about the water table, and you can see water on the surface there as well. This area of the borough didn't flood this year.
Can you be quiet, please, because Councillor Buckley's talking.
This area of the borough didn't flood by 5 centimetres. 5 centimetres more would have meant water in people's back rooms and gardens everywhere. It would have been everywhere. And I think, so the situation is that we can't underestimate what 5 centimetres is to everyone. And flooding for this area, we need to be aware of what it will cause. And if we can't manage it and we can't oversee it, we're really pushing this risk onto other people and other residents locally. I think it is really in our duty to look after those residents. So I ask the panel to think deep on this one, but I'll be happy to make a recommendation on refusal. But I don't know if anyone's willing to back me up on the second. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Teasey and then Councillor Sharp.
Yes, hello. I was when I looked at this before, I must admit that because we've seen this before, and it was as I think Councillor Carpenter said, we'd seen it, we put in conditions, and we said okay, meet these conditions, and on the face of it, they have met the conditions. But actually, I'm sort of being swayed here a bit, if I'm honest, because it's once again, as we've had in a previous debate, there's an in theory and in practice thing going on here. In theory, oh yes, that this will be, it's not that it's not in their interest, but I would question where did that come from? It appears that that's obviously what the owners have told us, and in the very little evidence we have, I mean, literally, we can see it. I'm sorry, but and it would come down once again to enforcement, and again going back to what we've seen in the previous debate. It looks like enforcement is not necessarily something we're very good at, and I'm sorry to say, but I do sort of question. I'm not. I would want to hear more before I sort of commit myself, but I'm now sceptical in a way I wasn't, and I have some deep concerns here.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure that the mitigations that have been put in place and suggested by way of condition, and that the storage system that has been proposed is actually going to meet the requirements of not only the site, but of the residents, to make sure that they are not put at increased risk of flooding. I think this is a very sensitive issue, and I think we need to ensure that the actions that we're taking here actually meet not only the legal requirements and the specifications for a site such as this in this sort of environment. I mean, I've seen sites like this. I haven't particularly seen this one, but I've seen sites that are very similar to this, and I've seen the way they churn through a lot of rubbish and a lot of material on a daily basis, and I've seen it piled high, and I've seen it disappear within 24 hours. So I know how, I've seen exactly how they work, and they can get through a tremendous amount of material. I think we need to, I'd like to ensure that if we are to go with officer's recommendation, which is to approve this, that actually we have put in sufficient mitigation to ensure that the residents are not put at increased danger of flooding, which seems to be the main issue here. I don't think we can particularly stop this site working because it's a regular operational business right now, and although it's changed as we've been told over the last 40 or 50 or 60 years, it is what it is right now. But we need to make sure that we're taking the right decisions in terms of ensuring that the mitigations are correctly in place. So I guess I'd like to understand that the flooding, the tanks that they've got in there, although it said it's a 1% probability, once in 100-year type thing, with the climate change that we seem to be experiencing, we seem to be having incidents that are supposed to be once in 100 years taking place twice or three times in 10 years. So do we need to consider, for example, doubling or tripling or quadrupling the size of the tanks that they've got in place, and would that reasonably mitigate that sort of risk and help the residents to be clearer about it? So I think that's where I'm coming from really with this, because we don't want to stop businesses doing what they do and operating in the way they do. Thank you.
I'm just going to go to Councillor Davis because I missed him out before. Sorry about that, and then I'll come to you.
So entering this meeting, I had thought this was going to be a fairly simple case, or development at or below flood level, so shouldn't contribute to flooding. Apparently not. It's a bit more complicated than I thought, and I don't think I'm in a position to judge this in a way that I'm comfortable with. So I would like to defer this for a month if we can, so we can read that 170-page planning report and really think about it.
Thank you.
I just want to ensure that members are clear that, and I did comment before, but this application is to ensure that there's hard standing that is impermeable and therefore, protects the soil. It isn't about the use, which I have commented on. In terms of the issues involved here, there is a significant, and the reference to how big the report is, this is an incredibly technical matter. And I'm not going to pretend to anybody here that I am an expert in flooding. That's why we go to the experts in flooding, both the fluvial flooding and the other flooding. And in this case, the principal consultee that is important to this is the local lead flood authority. And they have had all this information. And they have given us the view that this is acceptable subject to the conditions. And the conditions are the ones set out in the report. And I would have to say that we wouldn't put conditions on if we didn't think that they were defensible and that they were robust and that we could defend them and enforce them. Because we mentioned earlier in the meeting about the 6 tests that you have to ensure that conditions meet. So the conditions here are considered to meet that. And yes, if there is a problem or a breach, as happens on some sites, then we would look to see whether it was expedient to take enforcement action. But I don't think it's reasonable. I mean, the government are very clear in government policy that where you can mitigate or where you can address an issue through a condition, you should do so. And that's what we've got here. We're addressing the issue through conditions. And if there is a breach of that condition, then there are enforcement powers that we can use. And I hear comments about enforcement in the borough, but actually we're a very active borough in terms of enforcement, and we issue a significant...
Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate there is some strong feeling, but please do keep quiet.
A significant number of breach of condition notices. So yes, we consider that the tests are met by the conditions are enforceable. We're taking the advice of the experts, informing this report and coming to you with this recommendation.
Any other members wish to contribute? Or Councillor Singh?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, I've heard that the officers say that they're very good at enforcement. Just brings me to mind a couple of sites on the Drift Road. There's one site down there which has been stockpiling, and they've got loads and loads and loads of stuff there. It's just been left. I think the borough ended up picking up most of that when the site owner disappeared. There's another site not too far from the Drift Road, and they're piling up waste, and it's got to be about 40 or 50 feet high. And I've been contacting enforcement about that. It's right up to the pylons, and nothing's been done. My worry here is how are we going to enforce that? That where the machine is pumping out and mixing, is it clearing the sorting the waste? You've got the metal grill and the drainage system underneath there. I just don't understand how it's going to work.
Would you like officers to come back on
Please,
that?
yeah, they could, yeah.
Yes,
Thank
please,
you.
Nick.
Yeah, sorry, can I just make something clear? There is 2 ways that stockpiling arrives on site. One way is from the southern conveyor belt, but that's not how the totality of the waste material arrives there. Only the recyclable waste that is separated into individual bays on the southern side is transported via the conveyor belt. The rest of the demolition waste comes in via the access. There's an access point to the east, effectively the east of the site, through the brown area into the entrance and exit road. That's where the majority of the larger rubble stockpiling comes in. So it's not everything coming in on the conveyor belt to the south. That's actually a smaller proportion of waste. And if we go back to the image, if you look here, as I say, that's the recyclable image from the south. But if you look, for instance, that stockpiling is a different type of material, and that machine there is bringing that straight in from the access road. So it's happening in two directions. It's not solely coming from the conveyor belt to the south.
Okay. Look. If I can comment on that. Yeah. Look, I've got concerns. I want to go with officer's recommendation on this, but there are concerns raised. The ward councillors have raised concerns. Flooding is an issue. I know when you put concrete in the ground, you do affect the water table. I would be. I'm inclined to defer this as well. A second proposal to defer, and we'll have a site visit with officers present, and then come back and once we've got a better understanding. Because at the moment, I'm not comfortable. I don't understand it as well as.
What do you hope to gain by a site visit? What do you think you might learn from a site, just to get an idea of why you wish to?
Thank you. So carrying out site visit, I'd be a bit more comfortable. I'd know about the activities that's actually going on, what's actually happening on the site. It is a big site. I want to see well, I mean, there's water all over the place at the moment. I mean, it'd be interesting to see if the area is flooding and effect that's having on nearby houses at the moment. And obviously once we stick a load of concrete in there, if it does fit, because heaven forbid we approve this application, and 6 months' time you have a bit of rain and people will end up getting flooded nearby who don't normally get flooded, because there is this sort of fluvial flooding. I mean, that comes up from the ground, and if we do end up putting people in danger, risk of flooding as a result of the application, and especially when members haven't even carried out a site visit, I mean, that would be opening us up for possible legal action.
Thank you. Councillor Carpenter.
So can I just confirm that, surely whether we approve this or reject this evening, the site remains, because the site has planning permission to do what it's doing. So that's not going to make any difference to the benefit of the resident. The residents don't want it to be there, from what I understand. So, but we're looking at the piece of concrete that, that just one piece of concrete, not the whole site or anything like that. So I'm correct, right? So it's not going to make any difference to the site itself whether we approve or reject that piece of concrete. Am I misunderstanding something? Because it's not about the site itself. So,
Councillor Da Costa, please.
So my understanding is that residents are really concerned because we've had another severe flood in that area. We saw it in 2014. It was awful for families living there. I worked in the area at the time and it wasn't pleasant. And from when we listened to this application last time, when we asked for some amendments to be done, there were very few residential concerns about it then. And since then, we've had a huge amount of rain. This isn't just about the fluvial flooding which comes from the rivers. This is about rainfall. This is what we've seen recently. It's the rivers and the rainfall. We've had an awful lot of rainfall. And I understand that emotions have been stirred up because of recent flooding. But if we've got the experts telling us that the water displacement can be mitigated with these underground chambers, we have to listen to the experts. I'm not an expert in flooding. I know when there's water in the ground. I know when I can't go into my garden because it's soggy, but I'm not an expert in flooding, and I have to listen to the reports and I have to listen to the experts. None of us are flood experts here. And I do know that there are some areas within the borough that are much more prone to flooding than others. And there's a whole political debate about that is not for planning. And my concern is that if we keep on deferring and keep on deferring, we're actually not going to get a solution. We're going to get this resolved. And at the same time, operations will still continue, and that could actually become an even more increased risk to the area, because if we're not resolving where this displacement's going, we could end up like another year down the line, for example, where people will be affected. So I would much rather listen to the experts and put our faith in the experts rather than emotions in this particular case.
I'll second that.
So were you making a proposal there?
No.
No, she wasn't. So were you making a proposal? What's your proposal, Councillor Luxton?
I'll go for the officer's recommendation, because like we said, we are not the experts over here. We can, if there is a problem, the council will go back to it and sort it out.
Councillor Buckley, you wanted to come back in.
Yes, I just wanted to give some reassurances as Councillor Costa come in now. The recommendations from the specialists, the local flood authority, are based upon certain things happening, and in free of stockpiling is one. There's a number of objections, and basically they all go on to say, with such conditions in place, the local flood authority have no objections. However, they have objections if there isn't conditions, and there aren't conditions that are enforceable. In regards to our responsibility and in regards to flooding, as everyone says, you're not flooding experts, but all your experts are telling you that if you don't adhere to these conditions, there are serious issues. My concern is, and as officers said, they're putting conditions down, but we have a responsibility as well to make sure these conditions are enforceable, can be done, and are realistic. And I don't think that these conditions in this situation, this situ, are realistic and fair and reasonable for us to be able to be held responsible to. So my counter argument with officers is, yes, I agree, the conditions all sound great, and I agree with you in conditions. I'm not assured that we can manage these conditions, and on that basis, I would still go by my recommendation to go against applications. In regards to Councillor Carpenter's point, in regards to concrete, I understand that it's difficult to understand. Again, I refer back to the specialists. We are in a flood zone 3B. It's the highest level of flooding there. If you put a cardboard box in it, it can affect something, sound like. And we're talking about millimetres and centimetres here, about it coming into your kitchen, your front room. And you need to all be aware. And I'm not a flood expert, but I get flooded annually. These things don't happen for some people every 3 years or 10 years. They happen for some people annually, sometimes twice. Most people now are still flooded now. From January, they've been flooded again in March. This isn't seasonal things. You have a responsibility here. And if you feel these conditions can really be enforced and managed, then I would be supportive of that. But I have, as much as I listen to officers' conditions and they feel they're realistic, I have concerns that they're unrealistic and unenforceable. And as Councillor Sharp said, they can move 1,000 tonnes of concrete in less than 24 hours. And you need to be realistic about the size of this unit and the movement of tonnage and stockpiling. So it could flood the situation. You could have 1,000 tonnes of concrete in there 1 minute. It'll be taken away, and the situation is then you won't see what's actually affected that flooding down the road. So you have a responsibility. In regards to day-to-day use, this site is being used. It's very successful. It's very profitable. And it will continue doing that without this application. Okay. So there isn't any mitigating reason that I can see from the business practicality point of view that will affect their trade or affect their business. And on that basis alone, you know, we have to really fall on protecting residents. And I think if there's any doubt, and the local flood authority have been very, very clear. They have said that subject to these conditions, they've got no objection. But let's not kid ourselves, they've not got any objections. So do we believe the conditions we set will be manageable, will not put any more pressure on officers and everyone else to manage? And can we manage this site on a 24-hour basis, which it will need to be able to manage this process? And I think that's part of what we have to take the responsibility on here as a panel. But I'll put it to all of you. I've made the recommendation. I haven't got a seconder, but I'll leave that proposal there. But if I don't get a seconder, I have to go.
Thank you. Can I just quickly, before I bring you in, Councillor Teasey, just ask, Councillor Buckley was saying that, you know, if we didn't approve, it wouldn't affect the business and so on. So, but can we just be reminded of why they've brought this in the first place? Because it's to fulfil the environmental permit. It's not for business reasons per se.
Yes, that's correct. It's because it's a requirement of the permit that's required.
Can we let go someone else? Just let Councillor Teasey.
Yeah, so I find myself in weird agreement with just about everything that's been said, actually, including on both sides, even though both sides have actually almost, some are saying let's go with officer recommendations and others are saying let's not go with officer recommendations. I think let's see where we are. So it looks like number one, this is better than was there before. And I think most yes, it's better. It's arguably more credible in terms of in terms of what was there before, in terms of the prevention of the stockpiling. But I think a lot of us have got concerns over these sort of in theory and in practice as to well, look, there is going to be stockpiling there. Let's be honest. Okay, it might come off, you know, but guess what? Flooding will happen at any time, and it might happen, and it might be stockpiled at the time. It might not be stockpiled. We have agreed that the experts, the environment, the experts have said, well, look, subject to these conditions, this is fine. And actually, we've heard across this floor that actually we think they're the right conditions. It all comes down to sort of the enforcement. There's one thing that's sort of just occurred to me, as it were, which is almost like what would happen if we approve? What would happen if we don't? If we approve, then there are definite concerns about the enforcement of those conditions that we are putting in place. But if we reject, I think that that it's the same. I think that we still will have a problem with enforcement. It might actually even be harder because almost you haven't sort of set in stone that those conditions. So it's almost partly with regret, but partly on the basis of practicality that I would be willing to second Councillor Luxton's motion to go with officer recommendations here. The one last thing I would say is I don't think we can just defer unless there's a specific thing we're deferring for, and we just can't keep kicking the can down the road. This is the second time this has come back. I think we just need to decide one way or the other now.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. It just seems to me that having had an application rejected last time round, the applicant has gone away, done their due diligence, worked with the officers, and has come back with an application which, at least on the surface, from an officer point of view, and they are the experts, meets the requirements. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't actually accept the recommendation of the officers. It doesn't seem reasonable to defer, certainly, and so given that it meets the requirements, and we have an ongoing business there who have been operating for many years, I don't see any reason why we should not accept officer recommendation and move ahead with this, to be honest, unless someone can come up with a killing reason, but no one seems to have done so far, so I think we should just agree with officer recommendation and move ahead.
Thank you. Can I just remind members of the public to keep quiet, please, during the debate? It isn't a two-way thing, fortunately. If you wish to speak, you are able to register, as some people did. Councillor Costa, and then I think we'll probably be ready to move to a vote.
Just a very, very small point that as members of a planning panel, if we don't have confidence in officers' conditions, then we really need to question what we're doing here, because we've just had somebody reel off a list of conditions that they thought would make a planning consent acceptable, and now we're saying we've got conditions on this one that we're not happy that it can be enforced. I think we have to go with good faith and say that these conditions have been put on. The applicant has changed his original application. The conditions are on there. Stockpiling is not meant to occur in this place, and we've got to go with goodwill and say that this is the conditions in which this can be accepted.
Go on.
Sorry, just very
Yes.
quickly, if you put a condition of no stockpiling in some way, would that be?
Just pop your microphone on so that.
Sorry, if we put a condition of no stockpiling, I think there's a requirement for no stockpiling, but it seems to be in the condition, in the conclusion rather than in the conditions. I couldn't see it in the conditions. And if we put a condition of no stockpiling in the area, would that be something that would be considered to be reasonable?
Yes, that's a perfectly reasonable condition. I think the condition 7 to be carried out in accordance with the details of the flood risk assessment. That obviously part of that relates to the drainage strategy that is before you on the left-hand side of the screen, and that specifically says no stockpiling in the surface water drainage area. Obviously, there will be a temporary stockpiling from waste from the south, but that's continually removed on a daily basis. Otherwise, obviously, there would be no further material to be received from the south, so it would make sense for them to move them consistently. But in short, yes, it is fair to add that condition as well.
Chair, if I can say that what we would do is we would amend condition 7 to refer to the stockpiling, but the movement of the material through the area would be possible.
So, Councillor Luxton, would you be willing to accept that the condition to be put on? Yeah, and you're happy to continue seconding that? Sorry, I'm sorry. It's quite late, so we're getting to that point now. Thank you. So, are you happy with that, Councillor Teething? Okay. In that case, then, Mike, I think we're ready to.
So the first vote is actually for deferral because we had a proposed and a seconder. So we did. Councillor Singh. It was proposed by Councillor Davies to defer and seconded by Councillor Singh.
Said he was minded to.
Yes. You did propose to defer. Yes.
Yeah.
Did you propose to defer?
I said I would like to.
You weren't proposing that we do?
No.
We both seem to have written down that he proposed it.
So we do have to take a vote on it.
Okay.
Let's have a vote on it.
Okay.
So it is for deferral, against deferral, or abstaining from vote. Councillor Buckley?
For.
Councillor Carpenter?
Against.
Councillor Da Costa?
Against.
Councillor Davies?
Against.
Councillor Luxon?
Against.
Councillor Sharp?
Against.
Councillor Singh?
Well.
Councillor Amy Teasy?
Against.
Councillor Julian Teasy? So that motion falls, Chair, so we can move to the second vote. So that is to permit planning with conditions listed in the report with an amended condition 7 in relation to the stockpiling. That was proposed by Councillor Luxton, seconded by Councillor Julian Teasy. So the vote is for permitting the planning, against permitting planning, or abstaining from the vote. Councillor Buckley?
Against.
Councillor Carpenter?
For.
Councillor Da Costa?
For.
Councillor Davies?
For.
Councillor Luxton?
For.
Councillor Sharp.
For.
Councillor Singh.
Yes.
Councillor Amy Teasy.
For.
Councillor Julian Teasy. So 7-2, Chair, so the motion carries.
We'll just have a moment whilst public leave the meeting if they choose to now before our last two items. Thank you for coming. Yeah, very quickly, because could you just wait 1 second? Let's just let the public go, and then if you want to take a break then. Okay, so did you want to just have a quick one? Yeah. Done.
I've not had dinner yet, so. Oh, you haven't eaten yet? Oh, I ate at 5, never mind, I just went to sleep. I walked 6.5 miles for this. Oh, wow. Was that local? Yeah, I went on the lake, and then I went on the race. Everything hurts.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We're now restarting. Now, the next two items, I have obviously declared a conflict of interest as I'm the Cabinet Member for Children's Services. So as the Vice Chair isn't actually here, we need to appoint a chair for these two items.
Do I have a nomination for chair? So I do just have to take a name vote really quickly. So the proposal is for Councillor Carol DeCosta to chair the remainder of the meeting, proposed by Councillor Luxton, seconded by Councillor Sharp. Councillor Buckley.
For.
Councillor Carpenter.
For.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Luxton.
For.
Councillor Sharp.
For.
Councillor Singh. Councillor Julian Teasy.
For.
Unanimous, so you may proceed.
Thank you. I'll just leave the room. That's easy.
Sorry, onto the Lawns Nursery, thank you. I'll keep the presentation brief because it's quite a simple one. So yeah, the application seeks planning permission for an additional parking space within the site of the Lawns Nursery. So I've used the site location plan. And then the additional parking space next to existing ones. And here's a photograph of where it will go. And there's no conflict with policy, it's considered to be acceptable. What should I say about it? Thank you.
Like a truck done.
We don't have any speakers on there, so I'll open it up to the panel for discussion.
I think that we've just for the purpose of the meeting, we've seen this before, that the problem we had before has been certainly mitigated by the removal of the parking space. And without further ado, I would recommend we go with officer recommendations.
Oh, good. Can we go straight to the vote, Mike?
Yeah, of course we can. So that it is proposed by Councillor Julian Teasey, seconded by Councillor Sharp, to grant planning permission with conditions listed in section 12 of the report. Councillor Buckley.
For.
Councillor Carpenter.
For.
Councillor Da Costa.
For.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Luxton.
For.
Councillor Sharp.
For.
Councillor Singh.
For.
Councillor Julian Teasey.
For.
Unanimous, Chair. We can wrap that one up.
The next item is Hilltop First School, Clewer Hill Road.
Thank you. So this is a bit more of a complicated application. So the application is for a extension with some raised decking and then relocating some fencing within the site as well, and 3 additional parking bays by reconfiguring existing parking within the site. So I'll just bring up the plan. So the red line shows the application site area. This shows the existing site plan. And then you can see the proposed extension to the northeast with a decking around that. And the purpose of the application is to provide additional space for SEND pupils. So that requires relocating where the existing nursery room is within the extension and then reconfiguring that existing space to accommodate that classroom. And then you can see the parking spaces, which are sort of parallel down the access. So they're just reconfiguring that to get more parking onto the site. But it's to ultimately cater for an existing students, but then there could be some more additional ones as well, but not a significant number. So this just shows you the proposed ground floor plan, where you can see the extension with the nursery playroom and the external decking, the roof plan, and then these are the elevations showing where the extension is going, so you can see the decking beyond that, and just the other profiles of the extension with the decking, and you can see the low level fencing in between for the playground. And then this is just a photograph of where that extension will go within the site. I think, yeah, so, thank you.
And we don't have any speakers again, so I'm going to open it up to the panel.
One quick question before we move on. The external deck looks like it's only accessible by stairs from the outside, unless you want to go through the reception classroom or nursery playroom. Is that going to be a problem? So if you look at the top-down plan, that one, no, there. Yeah, the external deck looks like it's stairs only, if I'm reading that right, unless you go in through the nursery playroom or reception classroom.
So, yes, sorry, I'm not sure if the existing building has got ramped access to it. Other than that, I thought there was a ramp. I don't know the answer to that.
If you go onto the side elevation, it looks like it does look like stairs.
Yeah. Yes, sorry. So what I'm saying is I don't know if the existing building has another ramped access in, but for that extension, it is stairs to the decking.
It does appear that, you know, if there's an access issue, that it is possible to get out from onto the deck from inside the building. And so the issue would be getting into the building. And I don't know the specifics of this site, but it does look as if it would be possible for anybody to get out onto that deck through the building.
It's
not if there's any other
concern,
photographs, Claire, can you see if there's photographs of it getting into the main part of the building? All right.
I would be more concerned about evacuation.
Yeah, and again.
Can't use that word, so.
Oh, sorry.
Disabilities.
Well, can I say that I think realistically, operationally, there will have to be an evacuation plan. So, you know, what that evacuation plan, and whether it's a chair or whether it's a ramp, there will have to be one. So I would strongly suggest that there must be a way in and out of the building and for those with any form of mobility issue.
Yeah, and I assume that it has to comply with accessibility, so.
Yes.
There must be something that we're not seeing.
Yeah, and building regulations.
Yeah, okay, does that help?
So what's concerns are addressed by other things, building regulations, evacuation plans, so it's not a problem.
Yeah, okay.
In that case, I don't mind proposing to approve and then with offers recommendation.
Okay, I think there were a couple of other indications, so.
I was just going to second Devon's.
Okay, that's fine. Did you? Okay, go ahead.
I'm actually the ward councillor for this school, so just wanted to declare that. But I just wanted to ask, like, how many additional children is this looking at? Because
sorry, I've got from the design and access statement. It's expected that up to 10 more pupils will join the school to make use of the resource space and 3 more members of staff.
Thank you. I was concerned about this. Thank you.
Oh, Julian.
Thank you. I think we should welcome the fact that there's some additional SEND facilities in the borough. We're probably short of them at the moment, and it's important that they're spread out across the borough. It's nice, you know, most of the SEND facilities that we have are actually in Maidenhead, and it's good to see some coming to Windsor as well. So I think overall, I mean, it looks like this from the previous planning applications, it looks as if the school has grown over the last several years, 10 years or 12 years or 15 years, in quite a sprawly way, and there's quite a lot of development in the area from what I can see from the previous applications. It's not a thing of great beauty, I don't think, but I think it's practical and it works probably in the context of the environment and the school there. So I propose that we accept officer's recommendation and move ahead with this one. Thank you.
So we have had a motion to accept from Councillor Davies and a seconder from Councillor Buckley. So if we can go to the vote, that'd be great.
No worries. So we have a motion on the table to grant plan permission with conditions listed in section 11 of the report, proposed by Councillor Davies, seconded by Councillor Buckley. Take a name vote for to permit planning, against permit planning, and abstain from vote. Councillor Buckley.
For.
Councillor Carpenter.
For.
Councillor Da Costa.
For.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Luxton.
For.
Councillor Sharp.
For.
Councillor Singh.
For.
Councillor Gillian-Tizzy. That is unanimous. The motion carries. We can grab Councillor Tizzy, yes.
We did have a couple of questions.
Is Councillor Da Costa chairing for the rest of the meeting?
Yeah, we can have Councillor Costa chair the rest of the meeting, yes.
Okay, so we've got planning appeals received and planning decisions reported. Is the panel happy to note that? Is there anything that you wanted to ask any questions about? Okay, noted. Okay, thank you. Then I will close